Picture this. A woman stands outside a luxury hotel ballroom, her hand trembling on the door handle. Inside, champagne corks pop and laughter echoes, the kind of careless laughter that belongs to people who've never had to hide in a bathroom stall to eat lunch. They're waiting for her. They've planned this. Heather Sullivan's finger hovers over the play button on a slideshow titled Remember When. Every photo carefully selected to remind Tanya Bennett of the girl they destroyed. But here's what Heather doesn't know. The woman about to walk through that door isn't the victim they remember. She's the reckoning they never prepared for. If you want to see how this story unfolds, stay until the end. And drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this journey reaches across the world. The email arrived on a Tuesday. Tanya Bennett stared at the screen of her laptop, the cursor blinking accusingly over the unread message. The subject line was cheery, almost aggressively so. Riverside Academy class of 2013, 15-year reunion. You're invited. She should have deleted it. She'd deleted every other message from Riverside over the years. Fundraising appeals, alumni newsletters, invitations to homecoming games for a school she'd never once felt was home. But something about the timing caught her off guard. She'd just returned from Milan, still jet-lagged from Fashion Week, still buzzing from the standing ovation her keynote speech had received. She'd addressed a room of 3,000 people about resilience, about refusing to let others define your worth. And now here was Riverside, reaching through 15 years of silence like nothing had ever happened. Tanya's finger hovered over the trackpad. Delete. That's what her therapist would tell her to do. That's what her business partner Marcus would insist was the healthy choice. But Tanya had spent 15 years running from Riverside, and she was tired of running. She opened the email. Dear Tanya, can you believe it's been 15 years? We're so excited to reconnect with all our amazing classmates. Join us Saturday, October 12th at the Grand Meridian Hotel for an evening of memories, laughter, and catching up. Formal attire. Open bar. We can't wait to see what everyone's been up to. RSVP by September 30th. Hope to see you there. The Reunion Committee. Heather Sullivan, Madison Pierce, and Blake Crawford. Tanya's jaw tightened at those names. Of course it was them. The holy trinity of Riverside's social elite. The architects of her high school hell. She closed the laptop and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Manhattan penthouse. The city sprawled below her, all glittering lights and endless possibility. She'd built this life brick by brick, modeling contracts that started with catalog work and grew into Vogue covers, investments in tech startups that people said would fail, a skincare company that was now valued at $40 million. She'd become everything Riverside told her she could never be, and they wanted to see what she'd been up to. Tanya laughed, a sharp, hollow sound that echoed in the empty apartment. 15 years earlier, Tanya Bennett stepped off the bus at Riverside Academy with a backpack full of secondhand textbooks and a stomach full of hope. She was 14 years old, the only black girl in her freshman class, and one of only 3 scholarship students in a school where most kids arrived in cars that cost more than her mother's annual salary. The uniform, navy blazer, white shirt, plaid skirt, was supposed to be the great equalizer, but Tanya's blazer was 2 sizes too big, inherited from a cousin who'd graduated 3 years before. The fabric smelled faintly of mothballs and someone else's history. You'll do great, baby, her mother had whispered that morning, straightening Tanya's collar with hands rough from double shifts at the hospital. You're smart, you're kind, you're going to show them what you're made of. Tanya wanted to believe her. She wanted to walk through those ornate front doors and into a future that looked different from the cramped 2-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother. Riverside was supposed to be her ticket out, a prestigious education, connections, opportunities. Instead, it became a 4-year lesson in survival. It started small. Whispers in the hallway, glances that lingered too long. Madison Pierce, a blonde girl with a smile like a knife, was the first to speak to her. "Oh my God, I love your hair," Madison said on the second day of school, reaching out to touch one of Tanya's braids without asking. "It's so exotic. How long does it take to do?" Tanya froze, unsure how to respond. A few hours? A few hours? Every time?" Madison's eyes widened in exaggerated sympathy. "That must be so exhausting. I could never." The girls around Madison giggled, and Tanya felt heat crawl up her neck. She didn't understand yet that this was a performance, that Madison's curiosity was a weapon wrapped in sweetness. By the end of the first month, Tanya understood. Heather Sullivan made sure of it. Heather was everything Riverside valued. Wealthy, beautiful in that effortless way that came from good genes and better skincare, socially untouchable. Her father sat on the school's board of trustees. Her mother chaired every important committee. When Heather spoke, teachers listened. When she laughed, the whole cafeteria turned to see what was funny. And what Heather found funny, more often than not, was Tanya. "Is that dirt or acne?" Heather asked one afternoon in the bathroom, her voice loud enough to carry over the sound of running water. She was reapplying lip gloss in the mirror, her friends flanking her like an honor guard. Tanya was washing her hands at the sink beside them, trying to be invisible. "What?" Tanya's voice came out smaller than she intended. "Your face." Heather leaned closer, squinting with theatrical concern. "I genuinely can't tell if that's dirt or if your skin is just like that." The bathroom went silent. Every girl froze, waiting to see what Tanya would do. Tanya's hands shook under the water. "It's acne." "Oh." Heather's face arranged itself into exaggerated sympathy. "That's so sad. Have you tried, washing your face? My dermatologist says most acne is just from not being clean enough." The girls around Heather giggled, not unkind laughter, but the casual amusement of people watching a mildly entertaining show. Tanya grabbed a paper towel and walked out without drying her hands, leaving wet footprints on the tile floor. That night, she cried in the shower until her mother knocked on the door and asked if she was okay. "I'm fine," Tanya lied, because what else could she say? That she was failing at the one thing her mother had sacrificed everything to give her? That the girls at school looked at her like she was something they'd stepped in? She couldn't say it, so she stopped saying anything at all. By sophomore year, Tanya had developed a system. She arrived at school early, before most students, and claimed a spot in the library where she could eat breakfast alone. She kept her head down in the hallways, eyes on the floor, earbuds in even when she wasn't listening to music. She ate lunch in a bathroom stall on the third floor, the one near the science labs that nobody used, unwrapping her sandwich as quietly as possible and scrolling through her phone until the period ended. She became an expert at invisibility. But Heather and her friends had a talent for finding her anyway. It happened on a Tuesday in November. Tanya was sitting in the cafeteria. A mistake, but the third-floor bathroom was being cleaned when she felt the cold splash of liquid down her back. She gasped, jumping up, her white shirt instantly transparent and clinging to her skin. Chocolate milk. An entire carton poured deliberately over her head. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Phones came out instantly, dozens of them, recording her shock and humiliation from every angle. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Madison's voice was saccharine with false concern. "It slipped. I'm such a klutz." Tanya stood there, dripping, frozen in the center of a circle of laughter. She could feel the milk seeping into her hair, down her neck, soaking through her bra, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "Someone get her a towel," Heather said, her voice carrying across the cafeteria with practiced authority. "Madison, you need to be more careful. That shirt is probably the only one she has." More laughter. Tanya finally moved, grabbing her bag and running for the bathroom. Behind her, she heard Madison's voice, still loud enough to carry, "I said I was sorry. God, she's so sensitive." Tanya locked herself in a stall and stayed there until the final bell rang. When she finally emerged, shivering in her still damp clothes, she found the videos already posted across social media. #RiversideOops was trending in their small digital ecosystem. Comments ranged from "poor girl" to "she should just transfer" to worse things, much worse things, that Tanya read once and then tried to forget. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell anyone. She just started taking screenshots and saving them in a folder on her laptop. She didn't know why. Some instinct for documentation, maybe. Some small voice in the back of her mind that said this mattered, that someone should remember what they were doing to her. The folder was labeled Evidence. At the time, she didn't know what she'd ever do with it. Junior year brought new torments. Heather had perfected her craft by then, and her attacks had evolved beyond crude public humiliation into something more insidious. She'd learned that the most effective cruelty was the kind that left no visible marks, the kind that made you question your own reality. "You know Tanya, right?" Heather would say to new students, her voice dripping with concern. "Be nice to her. She doesn't really have any friends, and I think she's kind of struggling mentally. My mom's on the board, and she said Tanya's here on scholarship because of her circumstances. So, just be aware that she's sensitive about stuff." It was poison wrapped in compassion. New students would approach Tanya with the patronizing kindness reserved for charity cases, and when Tanya rebuffed them, because she could smell the pity, could sense Heather's fingerprints all over their sudden interest, they'd retreat, confirming Heather's narrative. "See? She's difficult. She's unfriendly. We tried to help her, but she doesn't want it." The teachers weren't much better. Mrs. Richardson, the guidance counselor, called Tanya into her office 3 times that year. "I'm worried about you," Mrs. Richardson would say, her face arranged in lines of professional concern. "You seem isolated. You're not participating in extracurriculars. Your teachers say you're withdrawn in class. Is everything okay at home?" "At home?" Tanya wanted to scream. "Everything's fine at home. It's here. It's this place." But she couldn't say it, because Mrs. Richardson sat on her leather chair in her office decorated with motivational posters about believing in yourself and reaching for the stars, and she looked at Tanya with eyes that had already decided what the problem was. Poor girl. Rough background. Can't adjust. Such a shame. "I'm fine," Tanya said each time, because what was the alternative? Explain that Heather Sullivan's father was on the board? That complaining would only make everything worse? That she'd learned the hard way that institutions protected people like Heather, not people like her? "Well, if you ever need to talk," Mrs. Richardson would trail off, leaving the offer hanging in the air like a lie they both knew would never be tested. Tanya would nod, thank her, and leave. And she'd add another note to her growing file of documentation, time-stamped and cross-referenced, building a case she had no idea how to prosecute. The prom invitation arrived in April of senior year. Tanya found it in her locker, tucked between her chemistry textbook and her gym bag, a cream-colored envelope with her name written in elegant calligraphy. Her heart jumped before her brain could catch up and remind her that nothing good came from Riverside Academy. She opened it anyway. "Tanya, I know we haven't always been close, but I felt terrible about how you've been treated at this school. You deserve better. Would you go to prom with me? I promise to make it a night you'll never forget. Jordan Hayes." Jordan Hayes. Tall, quiet, on the soccer team but not quite part of Heather's inner circle. He'd never been cruel to Tanya, but he'd never been kind either, just another face in the background of her high school nightmare. Tanya's first instinct was to tear up the invitation and throw it away. But then she thought about her mother, who'd been asking about prom for weeks, who'd already started setting aside money for a dress, even though they both knew they couldn't afford it. She thought about the fantasy she'd harbored since freshman year, that maybe, somehow, there could be one good memory from Riverside. One night where she wasn't invisible, wasn't pitied, wasn't hated. She texted Jordan that night. "Yes." His response came 30 seconds later. "Great. I'll pick you up at 7. For 3 weeks, Tanya let herself believe it. She found a dress at a consignment shop, midnight blue, simple but elegant. Her mother helped her with her makeup, showing her tricks she'd learned from YouTube tutorials. Tanya's younger brother, Marcus, took pictures of her in the living room, his phone camera clicking away while he grinned and told her she looked beautiful. "You're going to have the best night," her mother said, straightening Tanya's necklace, a small silver pendant that had belonged to Tanya's grandmother. "You deserve this, baby. You've worked so hard." Tanya almost believed her. Jordan picked her up at 7, just like he'd promised. He was wearing a suit, his hair gelled back, and he smiled when she opened the door. They drove to the venue, a country club on the edge of town, and Tanya felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Hope. They were halfway through the parking lot when she saw them. Heather, Madison, Blake. All of Heather's inner circle, standing in a semicircle near the entrance, phones out and pointing directly at Tanya. Jordan's hand was on her back, guiding her forward, but something in his touch felt wrong now. Too firm, too insistent. Jordan? Tanya's voice shook. What's going on? He didn't answer. He just kept walking, propelling her toward the circle of cameras. Heather stepped forward, her dress a blinding white, her smile sharp as broken glass. Oh my God, you actually came, Heather said, her voice loud enough to carry across the parking lot. Jordan! I can't believe she fell for it. You're a genius. The laughter started then, cruel, delighted laughter that crashed over Tanya like a wave. She turned to Jordan, searching his face for something, anything, that looked like remorse. He couldn't meet her eyes. It was just a joke, Tanya. Don't be so dramatic. A joke? Tanya's voice broke. You asked me to prom as a joke? No one actually thought you'd say yes, Madison chimed in, her phone still recording. Like, come on, you had to know this was a prank. Tanya looked down at her dress, her grandmother's necklace, the makeup her mother had helped her apply with such care. She looked at the cameras, at least a dozen phones recording her humiliation from every angle. She looked at Jordan, who was already backing away, disappearing into Heather's protective circle. She didn't cry. Not then. She turned and walked back to Jordan's car. He'd driven her so she couldn't even escape properly, and waited in the passenger seat with her hands folded in her lap while he finished talking to his friends. When he finally got in, reeking of cologne and self-satisfaction, she stared straight ahead and said nothing. He drove her home in silence. When she got out, he called after her. Tanya, seriously? It was just supposed to be funny. Don't make this into a big thing. She slammed the door and walked into her apartment building without looking back. Her mother was waiting in the living room, a smile already fading from her face. Baby, what happened? You're home so early. Tanya held up a hand. She couldn't speak. If she spoke, she would shatter, and she couldn't afford to shatter. Not now. Not when she had 3 more weeks until graduation and nowhere else to go. She went to her room, closed the door, and opened her laptop. She found the videos already, posted within minutes, tagged Mahesh prom fail and Hash Riverside rejects. She watched herself walk toward the cameras, watched the hope drain from her face in real time, watched Jordan's hand on her back like a betrayal caught on film. She saved every video, every screenshot, every comment. By morning, the post had 2,000 likes. By the time Tanya graduated, walking across the stage to lukewarm applause, no family in attendance because her mother was working and Marcus had a school conflict, the videos had been viewed 50,000 times. Someone had edited them together into a compilation. Best high school pranks ever. Tanya's humiliation was the finale. She didn't go to the graduation party. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. She just packed her bags, accepted her admission to a state school 6 hours away, and left Riverside Academy in her rear-view mirror. She told herself she'd never look back, but she kept the folder. Evidence. Just in case. Now 15 years later, Tanya stood in her penthouse and stared at the reunion invitation on her laptop screen. She should delete it. She should block the email and move on with her life. She'd built something extraordinary out of the ashes Riverside tried to burn her in. A career, a business, a life that would make teenage Tanya weep with disbelief. She didn't need their validation. She didn't need their apologies. But she wanted to see their faces when they realized who she'd become. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus, who was now a software engineer and her occasional voice of reason. You're not actually thinking about going to that reunion, are you? Tanya typed back. Maybe. Why? Because it's a trap. You know it's a trap. Heather Sullivan doesn't send invitations out of the goodness of her heart. Tanya stared at the message. Marcus was right, of course. He'd been 13 when she'd come home from prom, and he'd watched her lock herself in her room for 3 days. He remembered what Riverside had done to his sister, but he didn't know what she knew. 3 days ago, Tanya had received a different message, this one from Jordan Hayes, the same Jordan who'd betrayed her on prom night. The message was long, rambling, and reeked of guilt. Tanya, I know you have no reason to read this, let alone respond, but I need to tell you something. I'm a journalist now, freelance investigative work, and I've been looking into Riverside Academy for a story about institutional complicity and bullying. What I found made me sick. Not just what they let happen to you, but what they're still letting happen. And I need you to know about the reunion. It's not what you think. He'd attached screenshots of a group chat. Heather's name was at the top, along with Madison and Blake, and half a dozen other names Tanya recognized from her nightmares. The messages were dated 2 weeks ago. Heather. So I was thinking, wouldn't it be hilarious if we got Tanya Bennett to come to the reunion? Madison. Wait, Tanya? From high school? Does she even still live around here? Heather. No idea. But I found her on LinkedIn. She's like, nobody. Some random marketing job. Still looks rough a lol. Tanya's stomach had twisted reading that. Her LinkedIn was deliberately vague, listing only founder Bennett and Company, with no details. She'd learned early in her career to keep her success quiet. Too many people wanted to tear down black women who climbed too high. The messages continued. Blake. Why would we want her there? She was such a downer. Heather. Exactly. I want to do a slideshow, then and now. Show everyone how pathetic she turned out. It'll be therapy for people who felt bad about high school. Like, see, we didn't ruin her life, she ruined it herself. Madison. OMG, Heather, you're terrible. I love it. Heather. I'm putting her on the invite list. If she shows up, we'll have content for days. Jordan's message had ended with a single line. I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you then. I'm trying to make it right now. Don't go, please. But Tanya had read those messages and felt something shift inside her. All these years she'd carried Riverside like a weight. Shame for not being strong enough to fight back. Guilt for letting them break her. Fear that maybe they'd been right about her all along. Now, reading Heather's words, she felt something else entirely. Clarity. They hadn't changed. They hadn't grown. They were still the same cruel small people they'd been at 17, and they were planning to humiliate her one more time because they'd never faced consequences for the first 100 times. Tanya opened a new message to Jordan. Thank you for the warning. I'm going anyway. His response came within seconds. Are you sure? This could get ugly. I'm counting on it. She set down her phone and opened her closet. Past the casual clothes, past the business attire, to the back where she kept the pieces that made statements. She pulled out a dress. Black, architectural, custom-made by a designer she'd walked for in Paris. It had cost more than a semester of Riverside's tuition. She held it up to the light and smiled. The week before the reunion, Tanya called a meeting with her team. Marcus was there, of course, along with her business partner Simone, her publicist Derek, and her lawyer Michelle. They gathered in the conference room of Bennett and Company's offices, a sleek space overlooking Manhattan, all glass and steel, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from building something real. I need to tell you about Riverside Academy, Tanya said. For the next hour, she walked them through it. Not the sanitized version she'd told journalists when they asked about her inspiring journey, the real version, the milk in the cafeteria, the prom, the videos that had followed her through college, resurfacing every time she started to forget, the folder of screenshots she'd kept for 15 years, not knowing what she'd ever do with them. When she finished, the room was silent. Why didn't you sue them? Michelle finally asked. She was a litigator, sharp as a scalpel, and she looked personally offended on Tanya's behalf. I was 18, Tanya said. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I didn't have proof of institutional negligence, just proof that kids were cruel and adults looked the other way. And honestly, I just wanted to move on. But you kept the evidence, Simone said. She was Haitian, brilliant, and had known Tanya since their days grinding through state school together. You kept it for 15 years. That's not someone who wanted to move on. Tanya met her eyes. I kept it because some part of me knew I'd need it eventually. I just didn't know when. Marcus pulled up the screenshots Jordan had sent, projecting them onto the conference room screen. So Heather's planning to humiliate you at the reunion, publicly, with a slideshow. Yes. And you want to go anyway. Yes. Why? Derek leaned forward, his publicist instincts clearly alarmed. Tanya, you've worked so hard to control your narrative. Why walk into a situation designed to undermine everything you've built? Tanya was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady. Because for 15 years, I've let Riverside define that chapter of my life. I ran from it. I hid my past. I built this company under a name that doesn't immediately connect to me because I was afraid of what people would find if they looked too close. And I'm tired of being afraid. I'm tired of letting them win. So this is about revenge, Michelle said. Not a question, a statement. No. Tanya shook her head. This is about the truth. Heather thinks I'm nobody because I've kept my success quiet. She thinks she can humiliate me because she's never faced consequences for anything she's done. I'm going to that reunion to show her, to show all of them, that they didn't break me. They didn't win. And most importantly, they don't get to write the ending to my story. Simone grinned. Okay, I'm in. What did you need? What Tanya needed, as it turned out, was a team. Over the next week, they worked like they were preparing for a product launch, because in a way they were. Derek coordinated with select journalists, planting seeds about a major announcement from Bennett and Company. Michelle reviewed every piece of documentation in Tanya's evidence folder, building a legal strategy in case things escalated. Marcus and Simone worked on the technical side, creating a presentation that would make Heather's slideshow look like a middle school project. And Tanya? Tanya prepared herself. She went to her stylist and had her hair done. Natural, beautiful, unapologetic. She had her makeup artist create a look that enhanced without concealing, that said, "This is who I am," without shame. She rehearsed what she would say, how she would stand, what she would do when Heather pressed play on that slideshow. The night before the reunion, Marcus found her standing in front of her bathroom mirror, staring at her reflection. "You okay?" he asked. "I spent 4 years looking in mirrors at Riverside and hating what I saw," Tanya said quietly. "They made me believe I was ugly, dirty, wrong, and even after everything I've accomplished, there's still a part of me, a small part, that believes them." Marcus put a hand on her shoulder. "That stops tomorrow." "What if I'm wrong?" Tanya turned to face him. "What if I walk in there and I'm still that girl? What if they look at me and all they see is who I used to be?" "Then they're blind," Marcus said simply. "But you're not. You know who you are now. Don't let them take that from you." Tanya nodded. She looked back at the mirror, at the woman she'd become through years of therapy, hard work, and refusing to let cruelty have the final word. Tomorrow, she would walk into that ballroom. Tomorrow, she would face Heather Sullivan and everyone who'd turned her high school years into a trauma she was still processing. Tomorrow, she would show them exactly who Tanya Bennett had become. She just hoped she was strong enough to survive it. The Grand Meridian Hotel was exactly the kind of place Riverside Academy graduates would choose for a reunion. All marble columns and crystal chandeliers, the kind of studied elegance that whispered money without ever having to say it out loud. Tanya sat in her car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, watching well-dressed people stream through the entrance. She recognized some of them, older, softer around the edges, but still carrying themselves with that particular Riverside confidence that came from never having to question whether you belonged. Her phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "You don't have to do this. We can pivot, post a statement, control the narrative remotely." Tanya typed back, "I need to do this." "Okay, we're ready on our end. Jordan's inside. He'll signal if anything changes." She put the phone away and checked her reflection one last time. The dress fit perfectly. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair framed her face in a way that made her look powerful, untouchable, exactly like the woman she'd fought to become. But her hands were shaking. She closed her eyes and went back. Not to the ballroom waiting ahead, but to that bathroom stall on the 3rd floor. To the girl who'd eaten lunch alone for 4 years. To the version of herself who'd believed she deserved what they did to her. This is for her, Tanya thought, for the girl who thought she had to hide. She got out of the car. The walk to the entrance felt eternal. Every step was a choice, to keep moving forward, to not turn around, to believe that she was strong enough for whatever came next. The doorman nodded as she passed, and then she was inside, following signs that read Riverside Academy Reunion, Sapphire Ballroom, 2nd floor. Music drifted down from above. Something generic and upbeat, the kind of playlist designed to evoke nostalgia without committing to any particular era. Tanya climbed the stairs slowly, her heels clicking against marble, her heart hammering against her ribs. At the entrance to the ballroom, she paused. Through the open doors, she could see them. Heather stood near a projection screen, laughing at something Blake was saying, a champagne flute in her hand. Madison was taking selfies with a cluster of women Tanya vaguely recognized. The room was full of people she'd spent 4 years trying to avoid, now gathered in one place, blissfully unaware of what was about to happen. Tanya's phone buzzed one last time. Jordan. She's about to start the slideshow. Are you here? Tanya didn't respond. She put her phone on silent, straightened her shoulders, and walked into the ballroom. No one noticed her at first. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, past clusters of conversation, past the bar, past tables labeled with years, 2011, 2012, 2013. Her year. She found it in the back, mostly empty, a few scattered name tags that hadn't been claimed. She picked up hers. Tanya Bennett, class of 2013. Can I help you find your table? Tanya turned. A woman in her 40s, wearing a reunion committee badge, was smiling at her with professional courtesy, the smile you gave to strangers who might be lost. I found it, Tanya said, holding up her name tag. Thank you. The woman's smile faltered as she read the name, her eyes flicking up to Tanya's face and then away, uncertain. Oh, great. Well, enjoy the evening. She walked away quickly, and Tanya watched her make a beeline for Heather's group. She saw the woman lean in, whisper something, saw Heather's head snap around. Their eyes met across the ballroom. For one long, frozen moment, they stared at each other. Heather's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then something else. Something that might have been fear if Heather Sullivan had ever been capable of fear. Then Heather smiled. She handed her champagne glass to Madison and started walking toward Tanya, her heels clicking purposefully against the hardwood floor. The room seemed to hold its breath, conversations trailing off as people noticed Heather's trajectory and turned to see what had caught her attention. Hi, Heather said when she reached Tanya. Her voice was bright, friendly, completely devoid of recognition. I'm Heather Sullivan. I don't think we've met. Tanya let the question hang in the air for a beat. 2, 3. Then she said quiet and clear. Hi, Heather, it's me. Heather's smile froze. Her eyes widened, really looking at Tanya for the first time, and Tanya watched the recognition slam into her like a physical blow. Tanya? Heather's voice came out as a whisper. Tanya Bennett, she confirmed. Class of 2013. You sent me an invitation. The champagne glass Madison was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the suddenly silent ballroom. And just like that, everyone was staring. The shattered glass seemed to break whatever spell had held the room frozen. Suddenly, everyone was moving at once, phones emerging from pockets and purses, heads turning, whispered conversations erupting like brush fire. Tanya stood perfectly still in the center of it all, watching Heather's face cycle through emotions too quickly to name. Heather started, then stopped. Her hand fluttered to her throat, fingers touching the diamond necklace there, as if checking that it was real, that she was real. Tanya, wow, you look different. 15 years will do that, Tanya said evenly. Madison appeared at Heather's elbow, her eyes wide with something that looked like panic. She'd clearly already pulled up her phone, fingers flying across the screen. Holy shit, she breathed, loud enough for Tanya to hear. Heather, do you know who she is? Of course I know who she is, Heather snapped, but her voice had taken on a brittle quality. We went to school together. No, I mean... Madison turned her phone screen toward Heather, and Tanya watched Heather's face go pale. Whatever Madison had found, it wasn't the LinkedIn profile listing some generic marketing job. It was the truth. Blake pushed through the growing crowd, his expression somewhere between curiosity and alarm. What's going on? Why is everyone... He stopped when he saw Tanya, his mouth actually falling open. Wait, is that... Tanya Bennett, Tanya supplied helpfully. She was surprised by how calm her voice sounded, how steady. Inside, her heart was racing, her palms were sweating, but outwardly she was composed, untouchable. You probably don't remember me. I was very forgettable. I remember you, Blake said quietly, and there was something in his voice that sounded almost like shame, Almost. The crowd was pressing closer now, a wall of curious faces and phones held at chest height, everyone trying to look casual while obviously recording. Tanya recognized some of them. Emily Chen, who'd been student body president and had always pretended Tanya didn't exist. David Martinez, who'd once stepped over her when she was picking up books Heather had knocked from her hands. Sarah Kim, who'd laughed the loudest when the prom videos went viral. They were all here. All of them. Every person who'd made Riverside Academy a 4-year prison sentence. And they were all staring at her like she'd materialized from their collective guilty conscience. Tanya Bennett. A new voice cut through the murmurs. Jordan Hayes emerged from the crowd, and Tanya felt a flash of gratitude that he'd positioned himself near the entrance like they'd planned. He looked older than his photos, lines etched around his eyes that spoke of too much coffee and not enough sleep. I wasn't sure you'd actually come. Jordan, Tanya kept her voice neutral. Thanks for the warning. His eyes widened slightly, a signal only she would catch. The slideshow is ready. She was about to start it. Heather's head whipped toward Jordan. Warning? What warning? Nothing, Jordan said smoothly. Just reached out to make sure Tanya got the invitation. I'm on the reunion committee too, remember? Since when? Madison's voice was sharp with suspicion. Since I volunteered last month. Jordan's smile was pleasant, professional, and completely unreadable. I'm a journalist now. I thought it would be good to reconnect with old classmates. Do some human interest stories about where we all ended up. The words landed like stones in water, ripples of unease spreading through the group. Heather's fingers tightened on her clutch, knuckles going white. A journalist, she repeated. How nice. Isn't it? Jordan pulled out his phone, making a show of opening his notes app. Actually, Tanya, I'd love to get a quote from you for my piece on Riverside graduates. What brings you back after all these years? Every eye in the room locked onto Tanya. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications that Jordan had deliberately constructed. He was giving her the floor, forcing Heather to either play along or reveal that this reunion had never been about reconnection at all. Tanya took a breath. This was it. The moment she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head, lying awake in her penthouse while Manhattan glittered below. The moment she'd been preparing for since she was 18 years old, saving screenshots in a folder labeled evidence without knowing what she was building toward. Curiosity mostly, she said, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. I wanted to see if anything had changed, if the people who made high school challenging had grown into different versions of themselves. She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the familiar faces. I wanted to know if they'd ever thought about the things they did, if they remembered. Emily Chen shifted uncomfortably. David Martinez found something fascinating about his shoes. Sarah Kim's phone dipped slightly, though the recording light still blinked. Heather's smile could have cut glass. Well, that's very mature of you, Tanya. Personal growth is so important. I'm sure we've all changed since high school. We were just kids, after all. Kids, Tanya repeated softly. Is that what we were? Of course. Teenagers are cruel to each other. It's basically a rite of passage. Heather's voice had found its rhythm now, smooth and practiced. The voice of someone who'd spent years at charity luncheons and board meetings, smoothing over uncomfortable truths. I'm sure we all have regrets about how we acted back then. But that's ancient history, right? What matters is who we are now. I couldn't agree more, Tanya said. Who we are now. That's exactly what matters. Something in her tone made Heather's smile falter. Right. So, what have you been up to? The invitation said you're in marketing? Tanya felt the corner of her mouth lift. Marcus had deliberately kept her LinkedIn vague, knowing Heather would look, knowing she'd assume, knowing she'd plan her humiliation based on incomplete information. Something like that, Tanya said. Madison was still scrolling frantically on her phone, her expression growing more alarmed by the second. She grabbed Heather's arm, squeezing hard enough to leave marks. Heather, we need to talk now. We're in the middle of now. Madison's voice cracked with urgency, but it was too late. Someone else in the crowd had clearly done the same Google search Madison was panic scrolling through because a voice called out from near the bar. Wait, are you the Tanya Bennett from Bennett & Company? The room erupted. Oh my God, I use your skincare line. You were on the cover of Vogue. Didn't you just keynote at Fashion Week? Your company's valuation is insane. The voices overlapped, building into a chaotic chorus of recognition. Phones flew up, not just recording now, but photographing, capturing this moment from every angle. Tanya stood in the center of it all and watched Heather Sullivan's face collapse. It was everything Tanya had imagined and nothing like she'd expected. She'd thought she'd feel triumph, vindication, the sweet rush of revenge finally realized. Instead, she felt hollow. These people scrambling to suddenly know her, to claim connection to her success, they were the same people who'd watched her eat lunch alone in a bathroom stall. The same people who'd shared those prom videos and laughed. And Heather. Heather looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. Her mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging, her eyes fixed on Tanya with something that looked like betrayal, as if Tanya's success was a personal insult. You, Heather finally managed, you never said, your LinkedIn just said, Founder Bennett and Complu, Tanya finished calmly. It's all there. You just didn't look very closely. But back then you were a scholarship student with bad skin and secondhand clothes? Tanya kept her voice light, conversational, but every word landed like a hammer. I was. You made sure everyone knew it. Remember? You had quite a lot to say about my circumstances. The crowd had gone quiet again, but it was a different quality of silence now. Charged. Dangerous. Everyone was recording, and everyone understood they were watching something that would be dissected and analyzed and shared across social media within the hour. Jordan stepped forward, phone still out, journalist persona firmly in place. Tanya, for my article, can you talk about your journey from Riverside to where you are now? I think our readers would be really interested in how you built your success. It was a lifeline disguised as an interview question. He was giving her control of the narrative, letting her decide how much she wanted to reveal. Tanya met his eyes and saw the guilt there, still fresh after 15 years. He'd been part of her worst memory, and now he was trying to make amends by helping her rewrite the ending. She could accept the lifeline, tell a sanitized version of her story, talk about hard work and determination, and never mention the bullying that had nearly broken her. She could be gracious, mature, take the high road. But the high road hadn't protected her in high school. The high road hadn't stopped them from posting those videos. The high road hadn't made Mrs. Richardson believe her when she'd finally, desperately, tried to ask for help. Sure, Tanya said. I'd be happy to. She moved toward the center of the ballroom where Heather's projection screen stood waiting. The screen where, according to Jordan's screenshots, Heather had planned to display photos of Tanya's acne, her ill-fitting uniforms, her isolation, proof that the ugly duckling had stayed ugly, that failure was inevitable for girls who didn't belong at Riverside Academy. Tanya stopped in front of the screen and turned to face the room. Every phone was pointed at her now. Every eye was watching. This moment would be preserved forever, shared and reshared until it took on a life of its own. Good. My journey from Riverside, Tanya began, her voice steady and clear, started with survival. From my first day here to my last, I was bullied, systematically, publicly, cruelly, by students who saw my scholarship status and my skin color and decided I didn't belong, by teachers and administrators who looked the other way because it was easier than confronting what was happening in their halls. Heather made a small sound of protest, but Madison's hand shot out, gripping her arm hard. Don't! Madison's expression screamed. Don't say a word! I was called ugly, dirty, poor. I had milk poured over my head in the cafeteria while hundreds of students recorded it. I ate lunch in a bathroom stall for 4 years because it was the only place I felt safe. I was asked to prom as a joke and humiliated in a parking lot while cameras captured every second. Tanya's voice never wavered. And when I tried to get help, I was told that teenagers are just cruel, that I was too sensitive, that maybe the problem was me. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. Tanya could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the faint buzz of someone's phone receiving a text, could hear Heather's rapid breathing. I graduated from Riverside Academy believing I was worthless, Tanya continued. I believed the things you all said about me. It took years of therapy to understand that the problem was never me. It was a system that protected bullies and punished victims. It was adults who prioritized reputation over the safety of their students. It was classmates who watched cruelty happen and did nothing. Emily Chen was crying now, tears streaming down her face. David Martinez had gone pale. Sarah Kim had lowered her phone, her hand shaking. "But here's the thing about survival," Tanya said, and now her voice did shift, stronger, sharper, filled with something that burned. "When you spend 4 years learning that nobody will save you, you learn to save yourself. I put myself through college. I worked 3 jobs to pay for the dermatology treatments that cleared my skin. I took every opportunity that came my way and fought for the ones that didn't. I built a career in modeling, an industry that told me I wasn't pretty enough, and I proved them wrong. I started a skincare company for people like me, people who were told their faces were problems to be fixed. And I built something real, something successful, something that had nothing to do with Riverside Academy and everything to do with refusing to let you define me." She paused, letting the words sink in. "So when Jordan told me about this reunion, about the slideshow Heather had planned, Tanya saw Heather flinch, saw Madison's grip tighten, saw the collective intake of breath from everyone who'd been in on the joke. I decided to come anyway because I wanted you all to see what you tried to destroy. I wanted you to understand that your cruelty didn't work. I didn't just survive Riverside. I transcended it." Blake's face had gone from pale to gray. "Slideshow?" he said faintly. "What slideshow?" Jordan pulled out his phone, fingers moving across the screen. "The one Heather organized. She spent weeks collecting old photos of Tanya, planning to show everyone how she turned out. I have the group chat if anyone wants to see it." "You weren't supposed to," Heather's voice cracked. "That was private. So were the videos you posted of me," Tanya said quietly. "So were the photos you shared without my consent. So were the group chats where you coordinated your harassment. But we don't always get to control what becomes public, do we?" The crowd was murmuring now, phones buzzing with notifications as the story spread beyond the ballroom. Someone had clearly live-streamed parts of this, and the internet was doing what it did best, taking information and weaponizing it. "I never," Heather started, but her voice had no conviction. She looked around the ballroom, searching for allies, for someone to back her up, to confirm that this was all an overreaction, that they'd just been kids being kids. Nobody met her eyes. "You did," Tanya said, not angry now, just tired. "You all did, and the worst part, I don't think most of you even remember. It was just another Tuesday for you, entertainment between classes. But for me, it was my entire adolescence. It was trauma I'm still processing in therapy. It was the reason I kept evidence, screenshots, videos, photos, for 15 years, not knowing if I'd ever need them, but unable to let them go because they were proof that it happened, that I wasn't crazy, that I didn't deserve it." Mrs. Richardson appeared at the edge of the crowd, her face stricken. She was older now, grayer, but Tanya recognized her immediately, the guidance counselor who'd asked if everything was okay at home, who'd never once asked if everything was okay at school. "Tanya," Mrs. Richardson said, her voice shaking, "I had no idea it was this bad." "You had every idea," Tanya corrected gently. "You just chose not to see it, because seeing it would have required you to do something, and it was easier to assume the problem was me." Mrs. Richardson's mouth opened, then closed. She had no defense, and they both knew it. Jordan was recording everything, his journalist instincts clearly in overdrive. This was the story he'd been chasing: institutional failure, systemic bullying, the long-term damage of unchecked cruelty. And now it was unfolding in real time, in a ballroom full of witnesses who couldn't deny what they were hearing. "So what now?" Madison's voice was sharp, defensive. "You came here to shame us, to get revenge?" "No," Tanya said. "I came here to tell the truth. What you do with it is up to you." Heather finally found her voice, and it came out as a snarl. "This is bullshit. You're making yourself sound like some kind of victim when you're just bitter because you never fit in. We weren't that bad. We were teenagers. Everyone gets teased in high school." "I didn't get teased," Tanya interrupted. "I got tortured. There's a difference. And the fact that you can't see that difference is exactly the problem. You're being dramatic. Am I? Tanya pulled out her own phone. Her hands were steady as she opened the folder she'd carried for 15 years. I kept everything, Heather. Every video, every screenshot, every comment, every single piece of evidence of what you all did to me. Would you like me to share it? Give everyone here a trip down memory lane? The threat hung in the air like smoke. Heather's face went from flushed to white in seconds. You wouldn't, she whispered. Why not? Tanya asked. You were planning to do the same thing to me. Show everyone my worst moments. Prove that I deserved what you did. What's the difference? The difference is... Heather stopped, clearly realizing there was no good answer. The difference was power, and for the first time in their shared history, Tanya had it. Jordan stepped forward again, professional mask still in place. Tanya, in your research, did you find evidence of institutional negligence, of the school failing to protect students? It was another opening, another choice. Tanya could let this be about Heather, about individual cruelty between teenagers. Or she could make it about something bigger. She thought about the folder on her laptop. Not just evidence of Heather's bullying, but documentation of every time she'd tried to get help and been dismissed. Mrs. Richardson's notes about her being withdrawn and struggling to adjust. The emails she'd sent to teachers that had gone unanswered. The incident reports that had been filed and then quietly buried. She thought about Jordan's message, about other students who'd suffered at Riverside, about the system that had failed all of them. Yes, Tanya said quietly. I have extensive documentation of institutional failure. Teachers who witnessed harassment and did nothing. Administrators who prioritized the school's reputation over student safety. A guidance counselor who pathologized my response to abuse instead of addressing the abuse itself. Mrs. Richardson made a small, wounded sound. I also have evidence, Tanya continued, that this didn't stop with me. Jordan's been investigating, and he's found multiple former students with similar stories. Riverside Academy has a pattern of protecting bullies and abandoning victims, and that pattern needs to end. The ballroom erupted again, but this time it wasn't curiosity or excitement. It was panic. Alumni were calculating damage, thinking about their own children in similar schools, wondering if they'd been complicit in something they'd never examined. School administrators in attendance, Tanya spotted at least 2 current board members, were already pulling out phones, clearly calling lawyers. Heather stood frozen in the center of the chaos, her carefully planned evening collapsing around her. The slideshow would never be shown. The humiliation she'd orchestrated had backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving that Tanya Bennett was a nobody who deserved her treatment, she'd given Tanya a platform to expose the truth. This is insane, Heather said, but her voice was weak. You're ruining everything. No, Tanya said. I'm telling the truth. You're the one who's been living a lie. Madison grabbed Heather's arm again. We need to go, now, before this gets worse. Gets worse? Blake looked between them, realization dawning on his face. You actually did plan a slideshow. You were going to humiliate her. Again. It was just supposed to be funny, Heather started. It wasn't funny the first time, Jordan said quietly. It definitely wasn't going to be funny now. Heather's eyes filled with tears, not remorse, Tanya noted, but frustration, anger, the tears of someone who'd finally been caught and couldn't talk her way out. You don't understand. My father is on the board. My family has connections. You can't just come in here and destroy everything. I'm not destroying anything, Tanya said. I'm revealing what was already broken, what's been broken for years. Your father being on the board? That's part of the problem. That's how you got away with it. A new voice cut through the tension. Is this true? A man in his 50s wearing an expensive suit and an expression of growing horror pushed through the crowd. Tanya recognized him from the Riverside website. Mr. Sullivan, Heather's father, current board chair. Heather's face crumpled. Daddy, she's lying. Am I? Tanya turned to him directly. Your daughter organized a reunion event specifically to humiliate me. She collected photos from high school when I was being systematically bullied, bullying she led, and planned to display them publicly. She did this as an adult, a grown woman in her 30s, and she thought she'd get away with it because she's always gotten away with it. Mr. Sullivan's face had gone pale. He looked at his daughter, and something in his expression shifted. Not anger exactly. Disappointment. Realization. The look of a man who'd just understood that his child wasn't who he thought she was. "Heather," he said quietly, "tell me she's lying." Heather opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "Show him the group chat," Tanya said to Jordan. "Let him see what his daughter planned." "No!" Heather lunged for Jordan's phone, but Blake caught her arm. "Don't," Blake said. He looked sick. "Just don't. It's over." Jordan turned his phone toward Mr. Sullivan, and Tanya watched the man's face as he read. Watched him see his daughter's words, her casual cruelty, her eager anticipation of hurting someone who'd already been hurt so badly. When he looked up, his expression was broken. "Heather, what have you done?" "It was just supposed to be..." Heather's voice cracked. "She wasn't supposed to turn into... She was supposed to still be..." "Nobody?" Tanya finished. "That's what you were counting on, wasn't it? That I'd stayed broken? That I'd come here already defeated so you could finish the job?" Heather didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence was confirmation enough. "Mr. Sullivan turned to Tanya, and his voice was hoarse. "Ms. Bennett, on behalf of my family and the Riverside Academy Board, I owe you an apology, a profound apology. What happened to you should never have happened. And what my daughter planned..." He stopped, unable to continue. "An apology doesn't fix it," Tanya said. "An apology doesn't undo 15 years of trauma. But acknowledgement? That's a start." Around them, phones were still recording, still streaming. This moment was being captured and shared in real time, spreading across social media like wildfire. Tanya could see it happening. The notifications popping up on screens around the room, the comments starting to pour in, the story taking on its own momentum. Good. Let it spread. Let everyone see what Riverside Academy had been, what it might still be. Mrs. Richardson approached slowly, her face streaked with tears. "Tanya, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have protected you. I failed you." Tanya looked at her former guidance counselor and felt something unexpected. Pity. Mrs. Richardson had been a cog in a broken system, choosing the easier path at every turn. She'd failed Tanya, yes, but she'd also failed herself, failed the calling that had brought her to education in the first place. "Yes," Tanya said simply. "You did." "Is there anything... Can I..." Mrs. Richardson's hands twisted together. "How can I make this right?" "You can't," Tanya said. "Not for me. But you can do better for the next student who comes to you for help. You can listen. You can act. You can choose to be brave instead of convenient." Mrs. Richardson nodded, tears flowing faster. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was permission to try to do better. Sometimes that was all you could offer. The crowd was thinning now, people drifting toward the exits in small groups. Their reunion evening thoroughly derailed. Some looked shaken, some looked angry. A few, like Emily Chen, who'd stopped crying but couldn't seem to stop staring at Tanya, looked like they were having fundamental realizations about who they'd been and who they'd become. Heather was surrounded by her father and Madison and Blake, their voices low and urgent. Tanya caught fragments, damage control and liability and lawyers, but she didn't need to hear the details. Heather's perfect evening had imploded. Her carefully constructed image was in ruins, and for the first time in her life, she was facing consequences for her actions. Tanya found she didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. Jordan approached carefully. His journalist persona dropped. "You okay?" "I don't know," Tanya admitted. "I got what I came for. I told the truth. I exposed what happened. But I don't feel like I thought I would." "What did you think you'd feel?" "Vindicated, triumphant, something clean and simple." Tanya watched Heather being led toward a side exit by her father. "Instead, I just feel sad. This didn't fix anything. It just revealed what was always broken." "Sometimes that's all you can do," Jordan said quietly. "Reveal the truth and hope someone cares enough to fix it." "Is that what you're doing with your article?" "I'm trying to." He hesitated. "Tanya, I know this is the worst possible time, but I need to ask. The evidence you have, the documentation of institutional failure, would you be willing to share it? For the article? For the investigation I'm building? Tanya looked around the ballroom, at Mrs. Richardson, still crying in a corner, at Mr. Sullivan, his arm around his weeping daughter, at the dozens of former classmates who'd watched her suffer and done nothing. This could end here. She could walk away, take her moral victory, let the story fade from social media after a week or two. She could go back to her penthouse and her company and her carefully constructed life. Or she could do what 15-year-old Tanya had been doing when she saved those screenshots, build a case, make it matter, turn her survival into something larger than revenge. Yes, Tanya said, I'll share it, all of it, but I have conditions. Name them. This isn't just about me. You said there are other students with similar stories. I want them included. I want this to be about the pattern, not just my individual experience. Jordan nodded, already planned on it. And I want any money from this story, interviews, rights, whatever, to go toward a fund for bullying survivors. Therapy, legal support, resources that I didn't have. Done. And, Tanya took a breath, I want to be clear that I'm not doing this to destroy Riverside Academy. I'm doing this to force them to change, to become the school they always claimed to be, to actually protect their students instead of their reputation. Jordan met her eyes. That's going to take more than an article. I know. Tanya pulled out her phone, which is why I'm prepared to do whatever it takes. Congressional testimony if needed, lawsuits, public pressure campaigns. I have resources now. I have platforms, and I'm going to use them. A slow smile spread across Jordan's face. The girl who ate lunch in a bathroom stall is about to take down an institution. No, Tanya corrected. The woman who survived a broken system is about to fix it. There's a difference. Movement at the ballroom entrance caught her attention. Marcus stood there, concern written across his face. He'd been waiting in the hotel lobby, ready to intervene if things went wrong. When he saw her looking, he mouthed, "You okay?" Tanya nodded. She wasn't okay, exactly. She was raw and exhausted and carrying 15 years of trauma that wouldn't disappear just because she'd finally told the truth. But she was standing, she was here, and she wasn't hiding anymore. That had to count for something. She walked toward her brother, Jordan following. Behind them, the ballroom continued to empty, the reunion that never was finally dissolving into scattered groups of shaken alumni. Tanya heard fragments of conversation as she passed. Always thought there was something off about how they treated her. My daughter's at Riverside now. I need to. Can't believe Heather would. Should have said something back then. Too late, Tanya thought. 15 years too late. But maybe not too late to matter. At the entrance, Marcus pulled her into a tight hug. You were incredible, he whispered. I was terrified, Tanya whispered back. That too, but still incredible. He pulled back, studying her face. What happens now? Tanya looked back at the ballroom one last time. Through the doors, she could see Heather sitting at a table, her head in her hands, her father standing over her with an expression of profound disappointment. She could see Mrs. Richardson talking urgently to another administrator. She could see the remnants of her high school class, finally forced to confront what they'd been part of. Now, Tanya said, we make sure this meant something. They left the Grand Meridian at 9:47 p.m., less than 2 hours after Tanya had walked through those doors. Marcus drove while Tanya sat in the passenger seat, watching the city lights blur past the window. Her phone hadn't stopped buzzing since they'd gotten in the car. Messages, notifications, alerts piling up faster than she could process them. You should turn that off, Marcus said quietly. Just for tonight. Let yourself breathe. But Tanya couldn't look away. She scrolled through the notifications with a kind of horrified fascination, watching the story spread in real time. Someone had live-streamed significant portions of her speech. The video already had 300,000 views and climbing. The comments section was a war zone. Some people defending her, others calling her bitter, many debating whether high school bullying was really that serious. One comment stopped her cold. She kept evidence for 15 years? That's not normal. That's obsessive. Tanya's thumb hovered over the reply button, but Marcus reached over and gently pushed her phone down. Don't, he said. Don't read the comments. Don't engage. Not tonight. They're saying I'm the problem, Tanya said, her voice flat. That I should have moved on. That keeping screenshots makes me the crazy one. People always say that, Marcus replied. They said it when women came forward about Weinstein. They said it about every whistleblower who ever documented wrongdoing. They say it because it's easier than confronting what the evidence reveals. Tanya knew he was right, but the words still burned. She'd spent 15 years afraid that she was exactly what Heather had always claimed. Too sensitive, too dramatic, unable to take a joke. And now strangers on the internet were confirming her worst fears. Her phone rang. Derek, her publicist. She answered on speaker. Tanya, thank God. Where are you? Driving back to the city. What's happening? What's happening? Derek's voice climbed an octave. What's happening is that you just became the #1 trending topic on 3 different platforms. TMZ picked up the story. So did Page 6. I've got 17 media requests in the last hour alone. CNN wants you for their morning show. The Times wants an exclusive. And that's just the beginning. Tanya closed her eyes. I didn't think it would blow up this fast. You confronted your high school bullies while being secretly rich and successful? Of course it blew up. It's like every revenge fantasy the internet has ever had, except real. Derek paused. The question is, what do you want to do about it? What do you mean? I mean, we can try to control this narrative, or we can let it control us. Right now, you're the underdog who came back and won. But these stories have a way of turning. Someone will dig up something you said 10 years ago. Someone will find a photo of you looking less than perfect and use it to tear you down. Someone will flip this from inspiration to cautionary tale about vindictive women who can't let go of the past. The truth of his words settled over Tanya like a weight. She'd won the battle at the reunion, but the war was just beginning. So what do I do? She asked. You get ahead of it, Derek said. You control your story before someone else does. That means choosing your platforms carefully. That means being strategic about what you share and what you keep private. And that means deciding right now what you want this to be about. Personal revenge or systemic change. Systemic change, Tanya said immediately. It was always about that. Good. Then we need to pivot the narrative. This isn't about you versus Heather Sullivan. This is about institutional failure to protect students. This is about how many other Tanyas are out there right now, eating lunch in bathroom stalls, waiting for someone to care. Marcus glanced at her, pride evident in his expression. Derek was right. If she let this become about individual revenge, she'd win the internet for a week and then be forgotten. But if she made it about something bigger, something that mattered beyond her personal vindication, she could actually change things. Okay, Tanya said. Tell me what we need to do. They spent the rest of the drive strategizing. By the time Marcus pulled up to Tanya's building, they had a plan. Tanya would do one major interview, something prestigious, well-researched, given to a journalist who understood the complexities of institutional abuse. She would work with Jordan on his investigative piece, providing documentation and connecting him with other survivors. And she would use her platform to push for concrete policy changes at Riverside and schools like it. But first, she needed to sleep. Except sleep didn't come. Tanya lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying the evening on an endless loop. Heather's face when she'd realized who Tanya was. Mrs. Richardson's tears, Mr. Sullivan's disappointment. The weight of dozens of phones recording every word, preserving this moment forever. She'd told the truth. She'd exposed what happened. She'd stood in front of everyone who'd hurt her and refused to be diminished. So why did she feel so empty? At 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and opened her laptop. The folder labeled Evidence sat there, exactly where it had been for 15 years. She opened it slowly, scrolling through the contents. Screenshots of cruel comments, photos of herself looking miserable and isolated, videos she'd never been able to watch all the way through, an entire archive of pain, meticulously documented. She'd shown none of it at the reunion. She'd threatened to, but in the end, she'd kept it private, because showing it would have meant reliving it, and she'd already lived it once. That was enough. But now, looking at this folder in the quiet of her apartment, Tanya realized something. This evidence wasn't just documentation of abuse. It was proof of survival. Every screenshot she'd saved, every video she'd archived, it was her younger self's way of saying this happened to me, and it mattered. It was an act of resistance, long before she'd known what to resist. She created a new folder, titled it Foundation, and began sorting through the evidence with fresh eyes, not as wounds to be hidden, but as building blocks for something larger. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jordan, sent despite the late hour. "Can't sleep either? I'm drafting the article outline. When can we talk?" Tanya replied, "Tomorrow. Come to my office at 10. His response was immediate. "Thank you for trusting me with this. I know I don't deserve it." She stared at those words for a long moment, then typed, "You're right, you don't. But you're trying to make it right. That's more than most people do." The rest of the night passed in a haze of work. Tanya drafted a statement with Derek's guidance, outlining her intentions and pivoting from personal story to systemic critique. She organized her documentation, creating a clear timeline of events and institutional failures. She researched precedents, other schools that had faced similar reckonings, the policies they'd implemented, the changes they'd made. By the time the sun rose over Manhattan, Tanya had transformed her trauma into a case file. Not just evidence of what had been done to her, but a roadmap for preventing it from happening to others. She was exhausted. She was wired. She was terrified and exhilarated and still processing the fact that she'd actually done it, walked into that reunion and refused to be erased. Her phone rang at 7 a.m. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Miss Bennett?" The voice was female, young, shaking slightly. "My name is Alicia Moore. I'm a junior at Riverside Academy. I saw the videos from last night, and I need to talk to you about what's happening at the school right now." Tanya sat up straight, sleep deprivation forgotten. "Tell me everything." What Alicia Moore revealed over the next 40 minutes made Tanya's stomach turn. The bullying at Riverside hadn't stopped. If anything, it had gotten worse, more sophisticated, harder to prove. Students used encrypted apps to coordinate harassment. They created fake social media accounts to torment their targets. They'd learned from previous generations how to avoid leaving obvious evidence while still destroying their victims' lives. Alicia herself had been targeted for the past year. She was on scholarship, like Tanya had been. She was black, like Tanya had been. And she was enduring the same systematic cruelty that Tanya had survived 15 years earlier. "I kept thinking it would get better," Alicia said, her voice breaking. "I kept telling myself it was just high school, that I just had to survive until graduation. But then I saw your video last night, and I realized it doesn't get better unless someone makes it better. And I'm tired of waiting for adults to fix this." "Have you reported what's happening?" Tanya asked, though she already knew the answer. 3 times. To my guidance counselor, to the dean of students, to the principal. Every time they say they'll look into it. Every time, nothing changes. The kids doing this are all from important families, board members' children, major donors' children. The school won't touch them. It was Riverside's pattern, repeating itself with a new generation. And suddenly, Tanya understood why she'd felt so empty after the reunion. Confronting Heather had been cathartic, but it hadn't solved anything. The system that had protected Heather was still protecting bullies. The structure that had failed Tanya was still failing students. "Alicia," Tanya said carefully, "would you be willing to tell your story publicly, to be part of something bigger?" There was a long pause. When Alicia spoke again, her voice was stronger. "Will it actually change anything?" "I don't know," Tanya admitted, "but doing nothing definitely won't change anything. At least this way we try." "Then, yes, I'll do it." They talked for another 20 minutes, Tanya taking careful notes and promising to connect Alicia with Jordan and with lawyers who could protect her interests. When they finally hung up, Tanya sat in the growing sunlight of her apartment and felt something shift inside her. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It had never really been about revenge, she realized. It had been about mattering, about having her pain acknowledged, about forcing the people who'd hurt her to see what they'd done. But now it was about something more. It was about Alicia Moore and every other student currently suffering at Riverside. It was about breaking the cycle instead of just exposing it. Tanya called an emergency meeting with her team. By 10 a.m., they were all gathered in the Bennett and Comer's conference room. Marcus, Simone, Derek, Michelle, the lawyer, and Jordan, who'd arrived with 3 large coffees and an expression of determined exhaustion. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Tanya began. Last night changed things. I thought confronting my past would be enough. But this morning, I got a call from a current Riverside student who's experiencing the exact same things I did 15 years ago. Same tactics, same institutional indifference, same pattern. She pulled up Alicia's information on the screen. Her name is Alicia Moore. She's 17, and she's one of at least 5 current students Jordan has identified who are being systematically bullied at Riverside right now. The room went silent. Michelle was the first to speak, her lawyer's mind already working through implications. If current students are experiencing ongoing harassment and the school is aware and not acting, that's not just historical negligence, that's active liability. Exactly, Tanya said, which is why we're not just writing an article or doing interviews. We're building a case, a real case, with legal teeth and public pressure and the kind of documentation that can't be ignored or dismissed. Jordan leaned forward. I've been collecting testimonies from former students for 3 months. I have 7 people willing to go on record about their experiences. If we add current students like Alicia, we can show a pattern spanning at least 20 years. That's a class action lawsuit waiting to happen, Michelle said. Multiple plaintiffs, clear pattern of institutional failure, ongoing harm. We could push for not just damages, but structural reform. Derek drummed his fingers on the table. From a PR perspective, this is volatile. Suing a prestigious prep school, naming current students as plaintiffs, it'll get ugly. They'll come after you hard, Tanya. They'll dig into your past, your business, everything. Are you prepared for that? No, Tanya admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Simone, who'd been quiet until now, spoke up. What do you need from us? Everything, Tanya said. Marcus, I need you to work with Jordan on the technical documentation, organizing the evidence, creating a digital archive that's secure and admissible. Simone, I need you to run Bennett and Comper while I focus on this. Derek, I need you to manage the media strategy and keep me from getting buried. Michelle, I need you to build the legal case. And Jordan, she turned to him, I need you to write the story that makes people care. Jordan nodded slowly. I can do that. But Tanya, you should know, Heather's already starting her counteroffensive. My sources tell me she's hired a reputation management firm. They're going to come after your credibility. They're going to plant stories about you being vindictive, obsessive, manipulative. Let them, Tanya said. I have the truth. They have spin. I know which one wins in the long run. In the long run, sure, Derek said. But in the short run, spin can be devastating. We need to get ahead of their narrative. Then let's do that, Tanya said. I'll do the interview. One major piece telling my full story before they can twist it. Who's the best journalist for this? Michelle pulled up her phone, scrolling through contacts. I know someone at The Atlantic, award-winning investigative reporter. She specializes in institutional abuse cases. And she's meticulous. She won't print anything she can't verify. Set it up, Tanya said. And Jordan, when does your piece run? I'm working with a team at ProPublica. If I can get all the interviews done this week, we could publish in 2 weeks. But Tanya, he hesitated. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Are you sure you're ready? Tanya thought about Alicia Moore eating lunch alone in a bathroom stall 15 years after Tanya had done the same thing. She thought about all the evidence she'd collected, all the pain she'd archived. She thought about standing in that ballroom last night and finally telling the truth. I'm not ready, she said, but I'm doing it anyway. The team dispersed with their assignments, and Tanya was left alone with Jordan. He stayed behind, clearly wanting to say something but struggling to find the words. Go ahead, Tanya said. Whatever you need to say, just say it. I've been trying to figure out how to apologize to you for 15 years, Jordan said quietly. I've rehearsed it 1,000 times. But standing here now, I realize there's no apology that's adequate for what I did. I participated in one of the worst moments of your life. I betrayed your trust. I was cruel for no reason except that it made me fit in with people I didn't even like. Why? Tanya asked. Why did you do it? Because I was a coward, Jordan said simply. Heather asked me to. She said it would be funny, and I wanted her to like me, so I said yes. I didn't think about what it would do to you. I didn't care. And that makes it worse, doesn't it? That it wasn't even personal. that you were just collateral damage in my pathetic attempt to be popular. Tanya studied him. He'd aged well, but there were lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and carried guilt. He'd become a journalist, devoted his career to exposing institutional failures. Was that penance or just coincidence? You can't undo it, Tanya said. What you did to me that night, it's part of my story now, part of my trauma. You can't apologize it away. I know. But you can do something useful with your guilt, Tanya continued. You can help make sure it doesn't happen to the next person. That's not forgiveness. It's just pragmatism. I need your skills and you want to make amends, so let's use each other productively. Jordan nodded, accepting the terms of their alliance. I won't let you down this time. See that you don't, Tanya said, because if you betray me again, I'll destroy you. I have the resources now, remember that. I will, Jordan said, and left. Alone in her office, Tanya pulled up the folder labeled Foundation and added Alicia Moore's information. Then she created subfolders for each of Jordan's other contacts, former students willing to share their stories. She was building something now, something larger than her individual pain, an archive of institutional failure, a record that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Stop now or this gets ugly. You don't want to make an enemy of the Sullivan family. Tanya stared at the message for a long moment. Then she screenshotted it and added it to her evidence folder. Let them threaten her. Let them try to intimidate her. She'd spent 4 years being terrorized by Heather Sullivan. She wasn't that frightened girl anymore. She replied, I'm not your victim anymore. Get used to disappointment. Then she blocked the number and went back to work. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. The interview with The Atlantic took 6 hours. The journalist methodically working through Tanya's timeline, verifying every claim, examining every piece of evidence. Tanya relived things she'd tried to forget, the milk incident, the prom, the years of isolation. But she also talked about what came after. The therapy, the hard work, the conscious decision to build a life that proved she was more than what they'd tried to make her. Jordan's article came together faster than expected. Former students shared their stories, some on record, some anonymous, but all devastating in their consistency. A pattern emerged of wealthy students targeting scholarship students, of racial harassment being dismissed as misunderstanding, of administrators protecting the school's reputation at the expense of student safety. And through it all, Heather Sullivan's reputation management firm worked overtime. Articles appeared on sketchy websites questioning Tanya's credibility. Anonymous social media accounts suggested she was exaggerating for attention. Someone leaked her college transcripts, not impressive, but not shameful either, with the implication that she'd barely graduated. But for every planted hit piece, there were a dozen organic responses defending Tanya. Former classmates who hadn't witnessed her harassment but remembered her isolation came forward to say they wished they'd done more. Teachers who'd left Riverside spoke anonymously about the pressure they'd faced to ignore bullying involving powerful families. Parents of current students began asking uncomfortable questions about what was happening at the school their children attended. The story was growing beyond Tanya's control, taking on a life of its own, and that, she realized, was exactly what needed to happen. On the 4th day after the reunion, Michelle called with news. We have enough for a lawsuit. 7 former students as named plaintiffs, 3 current students, including Alicia Moore, and documentation spanning 20 years. We're filing tomorrow. What are we asking for? Tanya asked. Damages for the plaintiffs, but more importantly, injunctive relief requiring Riverside to implement specific anti-bullying policies, independent oversight of harassment complaints, and regular audits of school culture. We're not just going after money, we're going after structural change. How long until this goes to court? Could be years, Michelle admitted. These things move slowly, but the filing itself will generate publicity, and discovery will be brutal for them. We'll get access to all their internal communications, all their past incident reports. Everything they've been hiding will come to light. Tanya thought about Alicia Moore, still attending Riverside, still enduring harassment while adults debated legal strategies. What can we do now for the current students? The lawsuit will put pressure on the school to act immediately, Michelle said. They'll know we're watching. They'll know that any continued harassment strengthens our case. It's not a perfect solution, but it's something. That night, Tanya couldn't sleep again. She stood at her window, looking out at Manhattan, thinking about how far she'd come from that girl who'd hidden in bathroom stalls. She'd built a successful company. She'd become financially secure. She'd created a life that teenage Tanya would have thought impossible, but none of it would matter if she didn't use it to help the next girl hiding in a bathroom stall. Her phone rang. Marcus, calling from his apartment across town. "Turn on CNN," he said without preamble. Tanya grabbed her remote and switched to the news channel. A segment was starting, the Chiron reading Exclusive Tech Entrepreneur Sues Elite Prep School Over Bullying. And there she was, her senior photo from Riverside, the one where she'd looked tired and sad and defeated. Next to it, a recent photo from a gala, where she looked confident and powerful and nothing like the girl she'd been. The anchor's voice was serious, measured. Tonight, we're examining a story that has captivated social media this week. Tanya Bennett, founder of the multi-million-dollar skincare company Bennett & Company, has filed a lawsuit against Riverside Academy, the prestigious prep school she attended 15 years ago. Bennett alleges systematic bullying and institutional negligence, and she's not alone. Several other former students have joined the suit, and current students have come forward with their own stories of harassment. The segment cut to clips from the reunion. Someone had stitched together footage from multiple phones, creating a comprehensive record of Tanya's confrontation with Heather. Then it showed interviews with legal experts discussing the case, education specialists talking about bullying in elite schools, and finally, a brief statement from Riverside Academy's lawyers denying all allegations. "This is really happening," Marcus said through the phone. "This is national news." "I know," Tanya said, still staring at the screen. "Are you okay?" Was she? Tanya honestly didn't know. Part of her was terrified, of the scrutiny, of the backlash, of what would happen if she lost. But another part of her felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. "I think so," she finally said. "Ask me again when this is over." When will it be over? Tanya thought about Alicia Moore and the other current students, about the former students who'd shared their stories with Jordan, about the culture at Riverside that had persisted for decades, protected by money and prestige and institutional inertia. "When it's fixed," she said, "or when I've done everything I can to fix it, whichever comes first." They talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. Tanya stayed at the window, watching the city lights, thinking about tomorrow and the day after and all the days that would come. The lawsuit was filed. The story was out. There was no going back now. Her phone buzzed with the text from Alicia. "I'm scared, but I'm glad we're doing this. Thank you for not letting me face this alone." Tanya replied, "You were never alone. We just didn't know each other yet." She set down her phone and finally felt sleep pulling at her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new attacks, new obstacles. But tonight, she'd done what 15-year-old Tanya had needed someone to do for her. She'd fought back. The lawsuit hit Riverside Academy like a hurricane making landfall. Within 48 hours of the filing, 3 major news networks had picked up the story. Within a week, it had spread internationally. The narrative was irresistible. Successful entrepreneur returns to confront the institution that tried to break her, armed with evidence and a team of lawyers. It was David versus Goliath. Except David had built a multi-million-dollar company, and Goliath was a prep school that charged $60,000 a year in tuition. Jordan's article in ProPublica published on a Tuesday morning and broke the internet by Tuesday afternoon. He'd titled it, "The Price of Prestige: How Elite Schools Protect Bullies and Abandoned Victims." The piece was devastating in its thoroughness, weaving together testimonies from former students, leaked emails from administrators, and statistical analysis showing that harassment complaints at Riverside were dismissed at 3 times the rate of comparable schools. But it was the section about Alicia Moore that made the article go viral. Jordan had written about a current student, unnamed for her protection, though everyone involved knew who it was, who'd reported being called racial slurs in the hallway, only to have the guidance counselor suggest she was misinterpreting her classmates' intent. The counselor's exact words, preserved in an email Alicia had forwarded to Jordan. "Sometimes students from different backgrounds have different communication styles. Perhaps you're reading hostility where none was intended." The internet's response was swift and merciless. The hashtag #RiversideAccountability trended for 3 days straight. Alumni who'd never experienced harassment themselves began posting about what they'd witnessed and ignored. Parents of current students demanded emergency board meetings. Major donors threatened to pull funding unless immediate action was taken. And Heather Sullivan's world imploded. It started with her job. She'd been working as a brand consultant for a lifestyle company, the kind of vague position that existed primarily because of family connections rather than actual qualifications. The company issued a statement on Friday. After careful consideration, we have mutually agreed to part ways with Heather Sullivan. We do not tolerate bullying or harassment in any form. Then came her social media presence. Heather's Instagram, which had showcased her carefully curated life of charity galas and vacation photos, was flooded with comments calling her out. She deleted her accounts within days, but screenshots lived forever. Someone created a Twitter thread documenting every cruel thing she'd posted over the years. Subtle digs at people's appearances, passive-aggressive comments about certain types of students, photos from high school parties where scholarship students had conspicuously not been invited. Her father resigned from the Riverside board. The resignation letter, leaked to the press, was brief and formal, but reading between the lines revealed a man trying to salvage his own reputation by publicly distancing himself from his daughter's actions. Tanya watched it all unfold from her office, feelings she couldn't quite name churning in her chest. This was what she'd wanted, wasn't it? Consequences. Accountability. Heather finally facing the results of her cruelty. So why did she feel so hollow? Because destroying someone doesn't feel as good as you thought it would, Simone said when Tanya voiced this confusion. They were in Tanya's office, reviewing the latest media requests. Revenge fantasies are always cleaner than reality. In the fantasy, the bad person suffers and you feel vindicated. In reality, you watch another human being's life fall apart and remember that you're not actually a monster who enjoys watching people suffer. She deserves this, Tanya said, but her voice lacked conviction. Maybe, Simone allowed, but deserving consequences and enjoying watching someone receive them are different things. You're not Heather, Tanya. You never were. That's why this feels complicated. Before Tanya could respond, her phone rang. Michelle, the lawyer. We have a problem, Michelle said without preamble. Riverside's legal team just filed a motion to dismiss. They're arguing that the statute of limitations has expired for most of the alleged incidents, and that the current students' complaints are being handled through proper administrative channels. Tanya's stomach dropped. Can they do that? They can try. Whether they'll succeed is another question. We anticipated this move and we have arguments ready. But Tanya, there's something else. They're going after you personally. They filed a countersuit claiming you're defaming the school and causing intentional harm to their reputation. That's ridiculous. Everything I've said is documented. I know, and we'll win that fight. But it's going to get ugly. They're going to depose you. They're going to go through your entire history with a microscope. They're going to look for anything they can use to discredit you. Tanya closed her eyes. She'd known this was coming, but knowing and experiencing were different things. What do I need to do? Keep doing exactly what you're doing. Tell the truth. Stick to the facts. Don't let them provoke you into saying something emotional they can use against you. And Tanya, prepare yourself for them to bring up everything, your academic record, your dating history, your therapy sessions if they can get access. They're going to try to paint you as unstable, vindictive, and opportunistic. After Michelle hung up, Tanya sat in silence, staring at the city beyond her window. She'd built walls around her past, carefully constructing a public image that revealed success while hiding pain. Now those walls were coming down, and everything she'd protected was about to be exposed. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, though this time the message was different. I was in your class at Riverside. I never participated in what they did to you, but I never stopped it either. I'm sorry, I should have done more. If you need anyone to testify about what it was like back then, I'm willing. The message was signed with a name Tanya vaguely recognized, Andrew Chen, Emily's younger brother. He'd been quiet, forgettable, one of the masses who'd witnessed her suffering and looked away. More messages followed over the next hours, a steady stream of former classmates reaching out. Some apologized, some offered to help, Some just wanted to share their own stories of being marginalized at Riverside, if not to Tanya's degree, then in ways that had left their own scars. Jordan called that evening. My inbox is exploding. I've got 30 more former students wanting to share their experiences. This is bigger than we thought, Tanya. It's not just you. It's not even just Riverside. It's a whole culture at these elite schools where certain students are protected and others are acceptable targets. So what do we do with that? Tanya asked. We expand the story. I'm working on a follow-up piece about systemic issues in elite education. But more importantly, advocacy groups are getting involved. There's talk of congressional hearings about bullying in private schools. Some legislators are drafting bills requiring independent oversight of harassment complaints at any school receiving federal funding for student aid. Tanya felt something shift in her chest. This was what she'd wanted. Not just personal vindication, but actual change, policy reform, systematic intervention, protection for the next generation of students who didn't fit the prep school mold. That's good, she said quietly. That's really good. It is, Jordan agreed. But Tanya, you should know. Heather's lawyers are trying to paint this as a coordinated attack. They're claiming you're orchestrating a campaign to destroy her and the school out of personal vendetta. Let them claim whatever they want. We have the evidence. We do, but evidence doesn't always win in the court of public opinion. Her team is getting sophisticated. They're doing sympathetic profiles, painting her as someone who made mistakes as a teenager and is now being destroyed by an adult with resources and power. They're flipping the power dynamic, making her the victim. Tanya laughed, a harsh sound. Heather Sullivan, victim. That's rich. It's effective, though. I'm seeing comment sections shift. People are starting to ask if you're taking this too far. If maybe you should accept her apology and move on. What apology? Tanya demanded. She hasn't apologized. She's denied everything, hired lawyers, and is trying to destroy my credibility. That's not an apology. I know, Jordan said, but that's not the narrative her team is pushing. They're leaking stories about how devastated she is, how she's in therapy dealing with the trauma of being publicly shamed, how she wants to make amends but you won't let her. Tanya's hands clenched around her phone. So she gets to rewrite history again. She gets to be the victim of her own cruelty. Not if we don't let her, Jordan said. But Tanya, you need to be smart about this. Don't engage directly. Don't give them ammunition. Just keep telling the truth and let the evidence speak for itself. After they hung up, Tanya pulled up her laptop and did something she'd been avoiding. She read the comment sections. Jordan was right. The tide was starting to turn, at least in some corners of the internet. People were questioning whether ruining someone's career over high school behavior was proportionate, whether Tanya's success made her the powerful one now, and therefore the bully. One comment stopped her. She kept evidence for 15 years and filed a lawsuit the moment she got successful enough to matter. This isn't about justice. This is about revenge. And honestly, it's kind of psychotic. The word hit her like a slap. Psychotic. Unstable. Vindictive. The same words that would appear in Riverside's countersuit, in their attempts to discredit her. Her phone rang again. Marcus this time. Don't read the comments, he said immediately. Too late. Tanya, they don't matter. Random people on the internet don't know you. They don't know what you went through. They're reacting to a narrative Heather's team is carefully constructing. What if they're right? The words came out before Tanya could stop them. What if I am taking this too far? What if keeping evidence for 15 years is psychotic? What if I'm just using my resources to destroy someone because I finally can? Stop, Marcus said firmly. Listen to me. You didn't start this. You were minding your own business, building your company, living your life. They invited you to that reunion specifically to humiliate you again. You responded by telling the truth. That's not revenge. That's self-defense. But the lawsuit. The lawsuit is about protecting current students like Alicia Moore. You're not suing Heather personally. You're suing an institution that failed to protect its students. Heather just happens to be the most visible face of that failure. Tanya wanted to believe him, but doubt had wormed its way in, poisonous and persistent. The next day brought a development nobody had anticipated. A press conference was announced, scheduled for that afternoon. The speakers, Mr. Sullivan, the former board chair, and Riverside Academy's current administration. Tanya watched the live stream from her office, her team gathered around her. Mr. Sullivan stepped up to the microphone, looking like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice heavy. "I'm here today to address the allegations against Riverside Academy and to speak about my daughter's role in events that occurred 15 years ago." He paused, visibly gathering himself. "After reviewing the evidence presented in Ms. Bennett's lawsuit, and after difficult conversations with my daughter, I can no longer in good conscience deny what happened. Heather has admitted to me that she participated in systematic bullying of Tanya Bennett and other students during their time at Riverside. She has admitted that she planned to humiliate Ms. Bennett again at the reunion, and she has acknowledged that her actions caused real, lasting harm." The gathered press erupted with questions, but Mr. Sullivan held up a hand. "Please, let me finish. As a father, I am devastated by my daughter's choices. As a former board member, I am ashamed that I didn't see what was happening under my watch. And as a human being, I am profoundly sorry to Ms. Bennett and to every student who has failed by Riverside Academy's culture and leadership." He stepped back, and the current head of school, Dr. Patricia Winters, took the microphone. "Effective immediately, Riverside Academy is implementing a comprehensive review of our anti-bullying policies and procedures. We are bringing in independent consultants to audit our culture and interview current students about their experiences. We are establishing a new reporting system for harassment complaints that will be overseen by external ombudsmen. And we are creating a restorative justice program that will allow former students who were harmed to participate in the school's transformation." Dr. Winters continued, outlining specific policy changes, accountability measures, and commitments to transparency. It was everything Tanya had demanded in the lawsuit, and more. When the press conference ended, Tanya's office was silent. Finally, Derek spoke. "They're trying to settle. They're giving you everything you asked for publicly so they can argue the lawsuit is moot." "Is it working?" Tanya asked Michelle. The lawyer was already typing furiously on her laptop. "It's smart on their part. They're getting ahead of discovery, avoiding a trial that would expose years of internal communications. But Tanya, this is also real change. These are the reforms we were demanding. If they actually implement them—" "If," Simone interrupted. "That's the key word. Press conferences are easy. Following through is hard." Tanya stared at the frozen image of Dr. Winters on her screen. The woman looked sincere, but sincerity meant nothing without action. Her phone buzzed with a text from Alicia Moore. "Did you see the press conference? Does this mean things will actually change?" Tanya replied, "I don't know yet, but we're going to make sure they follow through." Another text arrived, this one from Jordan. "Heather wants to meet with you. Her lawyer just contacted me asking if I could facilitate." Tanya's stomach clenched. Why would she want to meet? "She says she wants to apologize, privately, face to face. Her lawyer says it's part of her therapy, making amends to people she's harmed." "And you believe that?" "I don't know what I believe anymore," Jordan admitted. "But I told her lawyer I'd pass along the message. What you do with it is up to you." Tanya stared at the message for a long moment. Part of her wanted to refuse immediately, to deny Heather even the opportunity for redemption. But another part of her, the part that had spent 15 years in therapy learning about healing and closure, wondered if there was value in hearing what Heather had to say. "I need time to think about it," Tanya finally texted back. That night, she called her therapist, Dr. Lisa Chen, who'd been helping her process trauma from Riverside for the past 8 years. They had an emergency session scheduled for the next morning, but Tanya needed guidance now. "The question isn't whether Heather deserves your forgiveness," Dr. Chen said after Tanya had explained the situation. "The question is whether meeting with her serves your healing. Will it give you closure? Will it help you process what happened? Or will it re-traumatize you and set back your progress?" "I don't know," Tanya admitted. "Part of me wants to hear her apologize, to have her acknowledge out loud what she did. But another part of me is terrified that I'll sit across from her and feel like that 15-year-old girl again. Powerless. Afraid." "You're not that girl anymore," Dr. Chen reminded her gently. "You have resources she doesn't, power she can't touch, the ability to walk away at any moment. If you do meet with her, you're choosing to do so from a position of strength, not weakness." "But what if she's not sincere?" What if this is just another manipulation? Then you'll see it for what it is and leave. Tanya, you've spent 15 years learning to recognize manipulation. You've developed incredible instincts for self-protection. Trust those instincts. They talked for another 30 minutes before Tanya finally felt steady enough to make a decision. She texted Jordan back, "Tell her I'll meet, but on my terms, my location, my rules, and you're there as a witness." His response came quickly. "Done. When and where?" Tanya chose a conference room at Bennett & Company's offices for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. Her territory, her control. She'd have Michelle there too, she decided, to protect her legal interests and provide another layer of safety. The days leading up to the meeting were tense. The media coverage continued, with new revelations emerging almost daily. A former Riverside teacher spoke anonymously about being pressured to change grades for wealthy students. An alumni donor admitted he'd threatened to pull funding when his son was suspended for harassment. The rot at Riverside went deeper than anyone had initially understood, and through it all, Heather remained silent, hidden away somewhere while her lawyers and her father spoke on her behalf. Tanya wondered what she was thinking, what she was feeling, whether she was experiencing even a fraction of the isolation and fear she'd inflicted on others. Tuesday arrived too quickly. Tanya dressed carefully that morning, a tailored suit in deep navy, professional and powerful. She wore her grandmother's necklace, the same one she'd worn to prom 15 years ago, a reminder of who she'd been and who she'd become. Marcus called as she was leaving her apartment. "You don't have to do this, you know. You don't owe her closure or forgiveness or even a conversation." "I know," Tanya said, "but I need to do this for me. I need to look her in the eye and hear what she has to say, and I need to know that I can sit across from her and not fall apart." "You won't fall apart," Marcus said with certainty. "You're the strongest person I know." At 1:45 p.m., Tanya arrived at her office building. Michelle was already there, waiting in the lobby with a leather portfolio and an expression of calm professionalism that Tanya envied. "Ground rules," Michelle said as they rode the elevator up. "You are under no obligation to respond to anything she says. You can leave at any time. If she says anything that feels threatening or manipulative, we end the meeting immediately. This is about you hearing what she has to say, not about giving her absolution." "Understood," Tanya said. Jordan was waiting in the conference room, looking nervous. "She's in the building. Her lawyer's with her. They'll be up in a few minutes." Tanya sat at the head of the table, Michelle to her right, Jordan across from her. They waited in tense silence until there was a knock at the door. "Come in," Tanya said, and her voice didn't shake. The door opened and Heather Sullivan walked in. She looked terrible. That was Tanya's first thought. Heather's hair, always perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was bare of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes and skin that looked pale and tired. She wore jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Good, a vicious part of Tanya thought, then immediately felt guilty for thinking it. Behind Heather came her lawyer, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expensive briefcase. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I'm Caroline Foster, Ms. Sullivan's attorney." Tanya nodded but didn't extend her hand. She kept her eyes on Heather, who couldn't seem to meet her gaze. They all sat, Heather and her lawyer on one side of the table, Tanya's team on the other. The physical distance felt symbolic. "Ms. Bennett," Caroline began, "my client has asked for this meeting because she wants to take responsibility for her actions and offer a sincere apology. She understands that no apology can undo the harm she caused, but she hopes that acknowledging the truth might be a first step toward making amends." "Let her speak for herself," Tanya said quietly. "If she's here to apologize, she can use her own words." Caroline looked at Heather, who finally raised her eyes. When their gazes met, something flickered across Heather's face. Shame, fear, recognition of how completely their positions had reversed. "Tanya," Heather's voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying. "I don't know how to start. I've rehearsed this 1,000 times and nothing sounds adequate." "Then just tell the truth," Tanya said. "That's all I've ever wanted." Heather took a shaky breath. "The truth is that I tortured you for 4 years. I made your life hell because it made me feel powerful and because my friends thought it was funny and because I could. I called you ugly when you were beautiful. I made you feel worthless when you were extraordinary. I turned the entire school against you because it was easier than examining why I needed someone to be beneath me." Tears started rolling down Heather's cheeks. "The truth is that I've thought about you almost every day since graduation. I told myself it was just high school, that everyone was cruel to someone, that you probably didn't even remember. But I knew. Deep down, I always knew that what I did to you was unforgivable. And instead of facing that, I tried to do it again. I planned that slideshow because some sick part of me needed you to still be that broken girl so I could feel like I hadn't done lasting damage. So I could tell myself it wasn't that bad." She wiped at her face with shaking hands. "And then you walked into that reunion looking like everything I was afraid you'd become. Successful, confident, powerful. And I realized that you'd transcended what I tried to do to you. You'd become someone despite me, not because of me. And it made me so angry because it meant I'd failed to break you, which meant I had to face what I'd tried to do." The room was silent except for Heather's ragged breathing. Michelle was taking notes. Jordan was recording on his phone with Tanya's prior permission. Caroline looked like she wanted to intervene but knew better than to interrupt. Tanya sat perfectly still, processing Heather's words. She'd imagined this moment countless times, Heather finally admitting what she'd done, acknowledging the pain she'd caused. In her fantasies, this moment had been triumphant, vindicating, a clear victory. Instead, she just felt tired. "Why now?" Tanya finally asked. "Why are you apologizing now after all these years?" "Because I have to," Heather said simply. "Because my whole life has fallen apart, and I finally understand what it feels like to be isolated and hated, and have everyone turn against you. And I realized, this is a fraction of what I put you through. This is karma, and I deserve every bit of it." "Is this an apology or a confession?" Tanya asked. "Because it sounds like you're here to make yourself feel better, not to actually make amends." Heather flinched. "You're right. I am here partly to make myself feel better. My therapist said I needed to face what I'd done, to acknowledge it out loud to you. But Tanya, I also need you to know, I was wrong. About everything. You weren't ugly or worthless or any of the things I said. You were brave and strong, and you survived something that would have broken most people. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Tanya studied Heather's face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the calculated cruelty she remembered from high school, but all she saw was a woman who looked genuinely broken, genuinely remorseful, genuinely lost. It still wasn't enough. "Your apology doesn't fix anything," Tanya said quietly. "It doesn't undo the trauma. It doesn't erase the years of therapy. It doesn't give me back the adolescence I spent hiding and hurting. Your sorry is just words, Heather. What matters is what you do now." "I know," Heather whispered. "Tell me what I can do. Please. Tell me how to make this right." "You can't make it right," Tanya said. "But you can stop making it worse. You can tell your lawyers to drop the countersuit. You can go on record supporting the reforms at Riverside. You can use whatever platform you have left to talk about the damage bullying does and the responsibility we all have to intervene. You can actually change, not just apologize for who you were." Heather nodded, tears still streaming. "I'll do that, all of it, I promise." "Don't promise me," Tanya said. "Promises from you mean nothing. Just do it. And maybe in 10 years, maybe in 20, maybe never. I'll believe that you've actually changed." She stood up, and Michelle and Jordan followed her lead. The meeting was over. "Tanya, wait!" Heather started, half rising from her chair. "No," Tanya said firmly. "You've said what you needed to say. I've heard it. That's all this meeting was ever going to be. Don't ask me for forgiveness because I can't give it to you. Don't ask me for closure because my closure isn't dependent on you. Just do better. Be better. That's the only thing that matters now." She walked out of the conference room without looking back, her team following. Only when they were in her private office with the door closed did Tanya finally let herself breathe. "You okay?" Michelle asked. "I will be," Tanya said. And she meant it. The countersuit was dropped within 48 hours of the meeting. Heather's lawyers filed the paperwork on Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon, news outlets were running stories about her public statement of accountability. She'd recorded a video, no makeup, no script, just her sitting in what looked like a therapist's office, speaking directly to the camera. My name is Heather Sullivan, and I was a bully, she began, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. For 4 years, I made Tanya Bennett's life a living hell. I called her names, I orchestrated her humiliation, I led a campaign of harassment that should have been stopped by adults who chose to look the other way. And when I had the chance 15 years later to do better, I tried to do it again. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to say that I was wrong, that the harm I caused was real and lasting, and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to prevent other people from inflicting the kind of pain I inflicted. The video went viral for different reasons than the reunion footage had. This wasn't satisfying justice or dramatic confrontation. This was uncomfortable, raw accountability. People didn't know what to do with it. Tanya watched the video once, then closed her laptop. She felt nothing, not vindication, not satisfaction, not even anger. Heather's public confession was a step, but it was Heather's step to take. Tanya had her own work to do. The real battle was just beginning. Jordan's follow-up piece published the next week, and it was even more damaging than the first. He'd uncovered emails between Riverside administrators discussing how to manage harassment complaints without creating paper trails. He'd found budget documents showing that the school spent more on liability insurance than on counseling services. He'd interviewed a former security guard who'd witnessed countless incidents and been explicitly told not to file reports. The article ended with a stark statistic. Over the past 20 years, Riverside Academy had received 147 formal harassment complaints. Only 12 had resulted in any disciplinary action, and of those 12, none had involved students whose families were major donors. Public pressure intensified. The hashtag evolved from #Riverside Accountability to #Private School Reform. Parents at similar institutions across the country began demanding audits of their own schools' policies. State legislators in 3 states introduced bills requiring independent oversight of harassment complaints at any private school receiving public funding through voucher programs or tax breaks. And then the dominoes really started falling. A former Riverside student named Marcus Reeves, no relation to Tanya's brother, came forward with his own lawsuit. He'd been harassed for being gay, subjected to slurs and physical intimidation that escalated until he'd attempted suicide his junior year. The school had responded by suggesting he transfer to a better fit rather than disciplining his harassers. Marcus was now 32, a civil rights attorney, and he had 15 years of documentation, including emails he'd sent to administrators begging for help. His lawsuit named not just the school, but specific administrators who'd failed to act. It opened a new legal front that made Riverside's situation exponentially worse. Then came Sarah Lynn, an Asian American student who'd graduated 10 years ago. She'd been subjected to racist comments and stereotyping throughout her time at Riverside, culminating in a prom queen campaign where students had created fake social media accounts mocking Asian stereotypes and attributing them to her. The accounts had been reported. The school had done nothing. And then Jamal Washington, a black student who'd been expelled for aggressive behavior after defending himself from a racial slur. The white student who'd used the slur had received a 1-day suspension. Jamal's expulsion had cost him college scholarships and derailed his entire future. Within 3 weeks, Riverside Academy was facing 6 separate lawsuits from former students, each representing a different failure of the institution to protect vulnerable students. The pattern was undeniable now. This wasn't about isolated incidents or teenagers being cruel. This was systematic negligence, a culture that protected certain students while treating others as acceptable casualties. Michelle coordinated with the other plaintiffs' attorneys, building toward a consolidated case that would be impossible for Riverside to fight. Discovery began, and what emerged from the school's files was devastating. Tanya sat in Michelle's office on a Friday afternoon, reviewing documents that had been produced in response to their subpoenas. Email after email showed administrators discussing how to quiet complaints, how to manage parents who were demanding action, how to protect the school's reputation above all else. One email from the former head of school to the board chair was particularly damning. We need to be very careful about how we handle the Bennett situation. Her mother has already called twice demanding a meeting. I've stalled, but we may need to offer something, perhaps a token suspension of one of the students involved. Nothing that creates precedent, but enough to make it look like we took action. The Bennett situation. That's what she'd been to them. A situation to be managed, not a child to be protected. "Are you okay?" Michelle asked gently, watching Tanya's face as she read. "I don't know, Mike," Tanya admitted. "I knew they didn't care. I knew they chose the school's reputation over my safety. But seeing it in writing, seeing them discuss me like I was a PR problem to solve, it makes it real in a way I wasn't prepared for." "We can use this," Michelle said. "This shows institutional malice, not just negligence. It significantly strengthens our case." "I know," Tanya said. "Use it. Use all of it. I want everyone to see what they did." But it wasn't just about what Riverside had done anymore. The story had grown beyond individual grievances into something larger and more important. Education reform advocates had seized on the case as an example of everything wrong with elite private schools: the insularity, the prioritization of donor relations over student welfare, the lack of accountability or oversight. Congressional hearings were scheduled. The Department of Education announced an investigation into harassment complaint procedures at private schools nationwide. And perhaps most significantly, parents at other elite institutions began demanding change. Tanya found herself at the center of a movement she'd never intended to start. She was invited to speak at education conferences, to testify before legislative committees, to meet with advocacy groups fighting for bullying prevention and reform. It was overwhelming and exhausting and occasionally terrifying. But it also meant something. It meant her pain had purpose. She was preparing for a congressional testimony on a Tuesday morning when Alicia Moore called her. Tanya hadn't spoken to Alicia in several weeks. Her lawyer had advised limited contact to avoid any appearance of coaching a witness, but she'd been following the girl's situation through Jordan's updates. "Ms. Bennett?" Alicia's voice was shaking. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but I didn't know who else to call. Something happened at school today." Tanya's stomach dropped. "What happened? Are you safe?" "I'm safe. I'm home now. But Miss Bennett, they fired Mrs. Richardson, the guidance counselor who ignored my complaints. She was escorted off campus this morning, and they called an all-school assembly to announce new policies. They brought in outside counselors to talk to students about harassment and reporting procedures. And Ms. Bennett," Alicia's voice broke. "Kids are actually talking to the counselors. People are coming forward with stories I never knew about. Things are actually changing." Tanya felt tears prick her eyes. "That's good, Alicia. That's really good." "It's because of you," Alicia said. "You didn't let them silence you. You fought back. And now other people feel like they can fight back too." After they hung up, Tanya sat in silence, processing what Alicia had told her. Mrs. Richardson was gone. The woman who'd looked Tanya in the eye and suggested the problem was her adjustment issues had finally faced consequences. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like the closing of a chapter that had stayed open too long. The congressional testimony took place on a cold morning in November. Tanya sat at a table facing a panel of legislators, cameras recording every word, knowing this would be her largest platform yet. "Ms. Bennett," the committee chair began, "thank you for being here today. Can you walk us through what happened during your time at Riverside Academy and how it has informed your current advocacy work?" Tanya took a breath and began. She'd told this story so many times now, to Jordan, to her lawyer, to journalists, to anyone who would listen. But this time felt different. This time, her words would become part of the official congressional record. This time, she was speaking not just for herself, but for Marcus Reeves and Sarah Lynn and Jamal Washington and every student who'd been failed by institutions meant to protect them. She talked about the milk in the cafeteria and the bathroom stall lunches. She talked about the prom and the videos and the way her reports of harassment had been dismissed or ignored. She talked about Mrs. Richardson and the administrators who'd chosen reputation over responsibility. And she talked about Alicia Moore, a student facing the same systematic failures 15 years later. "The question before this committee," Tanya concluded, "is not whether bullying happens. We all know it does. The question is whether our institutions, particularly elite private institutions that receive public funding in various forms, should be held accountable when they fail to protect their students. And I believe the answer is yes. Not to punish them, but to force them to change. To make them prioritize student welfare over donor relations. to create systems of oversight and accountability that can't be ignored or manipulated. Questions followed, some hostile, some sympathetic, all intense. A Republican senator suggested that lawsuits and federal oversight were overreach, that private schools should be allowed to govern themselves. Tanya responded calmly that Riverside had been governing itself for decades, and the result had been systematic abuse. A Democratic representative asked what specific reforms Tanya would recommend. Tanya laid out a detailed plan that she and Michelle had been developing: mandatory third-party reporting systems, regular independent audits, requirement that all harassment complaints be documented and tracked, penalties for schools that showed patterns of dismissing complaints. By the time the testimony ended 3 hours later, Tanya was exhausted but energized. She'd done what she came to do. Now it was up to legislators to act. She was leaving the building when she got a call from Derek. "Turn on the news. Any channel." Tanya found a TV in the building's lobby and stopped dead. The headline scrolling across the bottom of the screen read, "Riverside Academy announces major settlement and reform package." The news anchor was explaining, "In a stunning development, Riverside Academy has reached a settlement agreement with the plaintiffs in the consolidated harassment lawsuit. Details are still emerging, but sources say the settlement includes significant financial compensation for the victims, a formal apology from the school, and a comprehensive reform package that will reshape how the institution handles harassment complaints going forward." Tanya's phone rang again. Michelle this time. "Did you see?" Michelle asked. "I'm watching now. What happened?" They folded. Completely. "Your testimony this morning was the final straw. They knew they couldn't win in the court of public opinion, and Discovery was producing more damaging evidence every day. They're offering a settlement that includes everything we asked for and more." "What are the terms?" Michelle read through them. "Financial compensation for all plaintiffs, amounts to be negotiated individually. A formal public apology acknowledging institutional failure. Implementation of all the reforms Tanya had outlined in her testimony. Third-party reporting system, independent audits, mandatory anti-harassment training for all students and staff. Creation of a restorative justice program allowing former victims to participate in the school's transformation. And perhaps most significantly, establishment of a scholarship fund for students from underrepresented backgrounds, funded by redirecting money that had previously gone to legal fees and liability insurance. They're calling it the Bennett Scholars Program," Michelle said quietly, "in recognition of your advocacy and your experience." Tanya couldn't speak. The Bennett Scholars Program. Her name, attached to something that would help students who'd walked the same path she had. "Tanya, are you there?" "I'm here," Tanya managed. I don't know what I'm feeling." "You don't have to know," Michelle said gently. "This is a lot to process. Take your time. We don't have to respond to the settlement offer immediately." But Tanya knew her answer already. "Accept it, on behalf of all the plaintiffs. This is what we were fighting for." News of the settlement spread quickly. Reactions were mixed. Some people celebrated it as a victory for accountability. Others argued that financial settlements didn't constitute real justice. Heather posted a statement supporting the settlement and pledging to donate an equivalent amount to anti-bullying organizations. Some people praised her for taking responsibility. Others pointed out that empty gestures from wealthy people weren't the same as systematic change. Tanya largely stayed off social media during this period, letting Derek handle the public relations aspects while she focused on what came next. Because the settlement wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. She met with education reform advocates to discuss how to replicate Riverside's reforms at other institutions. She worked with legislators on bills that would codify some of the settlement terms into law. She consulted with school administrators who were genuinely trying to improve their cultures and systems. And she started planning the Tanya Bennett Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting bullying survivors through therapy, legal advocacy, and educational resources. It would be funded by her settlement money, by profits from Bennett and Company, and by donations from people who'd been moved by her story. 6 months after the reunion, Tanya stood in a conference room at Riverside Academy, addressing an audience of students, parents, and administrators. She'd been invited back as part of the restorative justice program, to speak about her experiences and the reforms they'd inspired. It was surreal being back in this building, walking these halls. Every corner held a memory. The cafeteria where milk had been poured over her head, the bathroom where she'd hidden during lunch, the hallway where photos from prom had been posted. But the building itself wasn't the enemy. It was just a building. The culture that had thrived here. That was what needed to change. "I'm not here to relitigate the past," Tanya began, looking out at the sea of faces. "I'm here to talk about the future, about how we prevent the next student from eating lunch in a bathroom stall because they're afraid to be seen, about how we create a culture where harassment is addressed immediately and seriously, not dismissed as teenage drama, about how we ensure that every student, regardless of their background or their last name or their parents' bank account, feels safe and valued." She saw Alicia Moore in the front row, sitting beside other scholarship students who'd been invited to this special assembly. The girl was nodding, tears streaming down her face. "Change is uncomfortable," Tanya continued. "Acknowledging institutional failure is uncomfortable. Admitting that we've been part of a broken system is uncomfortable. But discomfort is the price of growth. And I have to believe, that this institution can grow, that the students here now can have a different experience than I did, that the culture can shift from protecting reputation to protecting people." After the speech, several students approached her. Some apologized for things they'd witnessed but hadn't stopped. Some thanked her for making them feel less alone. Some asked how they could help with the foundation she was building. But it was a freshman girl, small and nervous, who said something that made everything click into place. "Ms. Bennett, I just wanted to say thank you. I was thinking about transferring because I was being teased about my accent. I'm from Vietnam, and I didn't think anyone would care. But after everything that happened, after all the changes, I reported it, and the school actually did something. They disciplined the students involved and set up a mediation session and made sure I felt safe. It worked. The system actually worked." Tanya felt something release in her chest, a tension she'd been carrying since she was 15 years old. The system worked. Not perfectly, not for everyone, not yet. But for this one girl, in this one moment, the system had worked. That was worth everything. She left Riverside that day knowing she wouldn't be back. Not because she was running away this time, but because she'd done what she came to do. The chapter was closed. The wound, while not healed, was finally no longer bleeding. A year after the reunion, Tanya stood in a community center in Brooklyn, cutting the ribbon on the Tanya Bennett Foundation's first satellite office. The main office was in Manhattan, but she'd wanted this one here, in a neighborhood that reminded her of where she'd grown up, accessible to families who needed help but couldn't afford high-rise office visits. Marcus was there, of course, and Simone, Derek and Michelle, Jordan, who'd won a Pulitzer for his Riverside reporting and had become a friend rather than just an ally, and dozens of people Tanya had met through this journey, other survivors, advocates, students who'd been helped by the foundation. Alicia Moore was there too, about to start her senior year at Riverside. She'd decided to stay, she'd told Tanya, because she wanted to be part of the change, wanted to help make sure the reforms were actually implemented and maintained. "Are you ready?" Marcus asked Tanya as they stood before the ribbon, scissors in hand. "I think so," Tanya said. "Ask me again in 5 years." "I'll hold you to that," he grinned. She cut the ribbon to applause, and people flooded into the new space. It was modest but welcoming. Therapy rooms for trauma counseling, a legal clinic for families navigating harassment complaints, a resource library filled with materials about bullying prevention and survivor support. And in the main room, on the wall, was a photo. It was Tanya's senior picture from Riverside, the one where she'd looked tired and sad and defeated. But next to it was a recent photo, Tanya at the congressional testimony, confident and powerful and completely transformed. Between the two photos, a plaque read, "This is not an ugly duckling story. This is a story of survival, resistance, and refusing to let cruelty have the final word." Tanya stood looking at those photos for a long moment. 15-year-old Tanya and 33-year-old Tanya, connected by trauma but no longer defined by it. "You did it," Simone said softly, coming to stand beside her. "You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into something that helps people." "We did it," Tanya corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this alone." Maybe not, Simone allowed. But you started it. You were brave enough to walk into that reunion and tell the truth. Everything else followed from that. Later that evening, after the crowd had dispersed and the celebration had wound down, Tanya sat alone in the foundation's main room. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, Ms. Bennett. My name is James Torres. I'm a sophomore at Riverside. I'm being bullied and I don't know what to do. Can you help me? A year ago, this message would have broken her heart, would have confirmed her worst fears that nothing had really changed, that the reforms were superficial, that institutions couldn't truly transform. But now she looked at it differently. This student was reaching out. He was asking for help. He knew that help existed, that he didn't have to suffer in silence. That was progress. That was change. She replied, Hi, James. Yes, I can help. Call this number tomorrow and ask for our student advocacy program. You're not alone and this is not your fault. We're going to fix this together. Then she added his contact to the foundation's database, creating a case file that would ensure he got the support he needed. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Heather. Tanya hesitated, her thumb hovering over the message. She hadn't spoken to Heather since that meeting in her conference room a year ago. According to Derek, who kept tabs on such things, Heather had largely disappeared from public life. She'd moved to a different state, taken a job at a nonprofit working with at-risk youth, and by all accounts was genuinely trying to make amends through action rather than words. The message was short. I saw the news about the foundation. I want to donate. Not for publicity or forgiveness, just because it's the right thing to do. Please let me know how. Tanya stared at the message for a long time. Part of her wanted to refuse, to deny Heather even the opportunity to contribute. But another part, the part that had built this foundation, that understood the complexity of growth and change, recognized that refusing would serve no one. She forwarded the message to Derek with a note. Accept the donation. Make sure it's anonymous. Use it for the scholarship fund. Then she added, and Derek? Make sure we're watching her. If this is genuine, if she really has changed, maybe in a few years we can talk about her doing volunteer work with the foundation. But she needs to prove it first. Words are easy. Actions matter. Derek's response was immediate. On it. And Tanya, I'm proud of you. For all of this. Tanya smiled, set down her phone, and looked around the space she'd created. The foundation wouldn't solve everything. Students would still be bullied. Schools would still fail to protect them. The culture that had enabled Heather's cruelty was deeply rooted and wouldn't disappear overnight. But now there was infrastructure to fight back, resources for survivors, advocacy for change, a system, however imperfect, dedicated to ensuring that the next kid hiding in a bathroom stall knew they had options. She thought about writing a letter to 15-year-old Tanya, telling her that it would get better, that she would survive, that she would build something beautiful out of the ashes. But she realized she didn't need to. 15-year-old Tanya had already known, on some level. That's why she'd saved the screenshots. That's why she'd documented everything. She'd been building a case, creating evidence, preparing for a day when she'd be strong enough to use it. She'd been saving herself, even when she didn't know it yet. Tanya stood, turned off the lights, and locked the foundation's door behind her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more students needing help, more institutions resisting change, more people who thought the past should stay buried. But tomorrow would also bring progress. Students speaking up, schools implementing reforms, survivors finding community and support. The work would never be finished, but the work mattered. And that was enough. She walked out into the Brooklyn evening. The city lights spread before her like possibilities, and for the first time in 18 years, Tanya Bennett felt something she'd almost forgotten. Peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Not forgetting what had happened, but transforming it into something that mattered. Not revenge, but revolution. Quiet, persistent, committed to ensuring that her trauma was the last generation's problem, not the next generation's inheritance. She pulled out her phone one more time and opened her messages with Alicia Moore. How are you doing? She typed. Alicia's response came quickly. Better. Actually better. Thank you for everything, Ms. Bennett. Thank you for showing me that we don't have to accept cruelty as inevitable, that we can fight back, that we can win. Tanya smiled and typed her reply. You were always going to win, Alicia. You just needed to know you weren't fighting alone. That's what we're building here, a community that refuses to let anyone suffer in silence again. Keep being brave, keep speaking up, and know that I'm always here if you need me." She sent the message and put her phone away. The subway station was just ahead, the familiar rumble of trains beneath the street. She'd take the train home, order takeout, maybe call Marcus and decompress. Tomorrow she had meetings with legislators, interviews with journalists, and a conference call with administrators at another prep school looking to implement Riverside-style reforms. But tonight, she was just Tanya Bennett, survivor, advocate, founder, and finally, free from the weight of unanswered pain. She descended into the subway, joining the flow of people heading home after long days of their own battles and victories. In the crowd, she was anonymous again, no longer the woman from the viral videos or the face of education reform. Just someone who'd survived something terrible and decided that survival wasn't enough. Transformation was the goal. And transformation wasn't just personal, it was systemic, communal, revolutionary in its quiet insistence that things could be different. The train arrived and Tanya stepped aboard, finding a seat near the window. As the car lurched into motion, carrying her through the tunnels beneath the city, she caught her reflection in the dark glass. She looked tired, yes. The past year had been exhausting, but she also looked content in a way that 15-year-old Tanya never would have believed possible. That girl in the bathroom stall, eating lunch alone, documenting her pain in screenshots she didn't know how to use. She'd become this woman. Not despite the trauma, but through it. Not by forgetting or forgiving prematurely, but by refusing to let cruelty have the last word. The reunion had been a catalyst, yes, but it wasn't the ending. It was barely even the beginning. The real work, the work of changing systems and cultures and ensuring that no other student suffered what she'd suffered, that work would continue for the rest of her life. And Tanya Bennett was ready for it. Because she'd learned something in the past year, something that 15 years of therapy had taught her, but that she'd only truly understood when she'd walked into that ballroom and faced her past. She'd always had worth. Heather Sullivan and Riverside Academy hadn't taken it away. They'd just convinced her to hide it for a while. But she wasn't hiding anymore. And neither would the students who came after her, not if she had anything to say about it. The train emerged from the tunnel into the open air, and Manhattan's skyline appeared glittering against the darkening sky. Tanya looked at it, the city she'd claimed, the life she'd built, the future she'd fought for, and smiled. She'd survived Riverside Academy. She'd confronted her bullies. She'd forced institutional change. She'd built a foundation to help others. But more than any of that, she'd reclaimed something Heather Sullivan had tried to steal 15 years ago. Her own narrative, her own voice, her own unshakable belief that she mattered. That was the real victory. That was the triumph that no lawsuit settlement or viral video or congressional testimony could match. Tanya Bennett knew who she was, and she knew she was enough. Everything else was just details.